And we are back. It's another great episode of Liam Picks Fights, coming at you with a little bit of a different format today, folks. I had a guest lined up. Some personal things came up for him last minute, so what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to break down the main event for UFC 270, Francis Ngannou versus Ciryl Gane. I'm going to go through it deep from a tape study perspective. We're going to go over, where these guys got started, what their skills look like, how they're going to interact with each other, what some of the intangibles are, what the stats say about the matchup. And we're really going to try and figure out, who we think is going to win, where we think there might be a betting edge, and, really talk through any questions you have, comments, concerns about this fight. It's one that I'm really fired up about. I have, 30 plus pages of notes myself. So this is one I'm dying to break down, and I'm interested to hear how you guys broke down this fight as well. So first and foremost, want to thank everybody who's stopping by live. I know we had a little bit of technical difficulties off the rip. Had to get myself situated over here, set up. Not in our typical studio location, but we're still going to make it work. No problem. Want to shout out my man Daz in the comments. Says, hope Francis does his windmill impersonation. That would be fun to see. We've seen it from him more than once before. We got my man Eric bets fights in the comments. No joke. I honestly think that's exactly what he should do. And hey, we'll discuss that here as we break down this fight. I certainly think it's an option for our man Francis Ngannou to come out here windmilling shots, but I don't think it's the only option that he's going to have here. So want to say that this piece of content, all the content that I do, is brought to you by PrizePicks. If you guys are interested, you can go ahead and get started by going to prizepicks.com, put in my promo code Liam. They will deposit match you 100% up to $100 on that first deposit. If you want to read what I have to say about these fights, check out my writing on rotogrinders.com. I also put up articles now for Pub Sports Radio, and I'm going to be doing a live watch along with the Pub Sports Radio people on Saturday for these fights. So if you want to check that out, all my live betting thoughts will be available, and we have a heck of a fun time. So we be Pub, and check it out on Pub Sports Radio as well. So any other information, it's in that description box below. I will not waste any more time, guys. We can get started. First, want to bring up the fact that, last week we were able to turn a profit on our bets, which is always exciting. But also we started out the year, 8 predictions correct, 2 predictions incorrect. Every bet that we took last week, if you direct your attention over here, we finished up with closing line value, which is always what we're looking to do. So very exciting way to start off the year. And then, we're going to kick it over to bestfightodds.com, right? And I think this is a great place to get started. We look at Ciryl Gane coming into this fight as the interim champion, and you see minus 150 basically across the board. The market average right now sitting at minus 152 for the interim champion, Ciryl Gane. And then meanwhile, we've got Francis Ngannou, the sitting champion, right? Undisputed up until this point. And Francis is sitting at a market average of plus 126. If you line shop, you can find plus 130, plus 132 on the big man, Francis Ngannou. So, this is a fight that opened up closer to pick'em odds. And now we're seeing that, a lot of money has come in on the side of Ciryl Gane. That's sharp money and that's public money. This guy, Ciryl Gane, has captured the attention of the masses. And I think that, it's for good reason. The guy doesn't move like a typical heavyweight. He's very fast. He's very nimble. He's very athletic. He throws at a pretty good volume. He paces himself really well. He's pretty agile. He does a lot of things that, typical heavyweights don't do. He leaves his feet to throw flying knees and gets pretty good elevation, So Ciryl Gane presents a lot of interesting, unique challenges. But then we've got Francis Ngannou on the other side here. He's got a 100% finish rate, guys. The guy is, dangerous in every position. When we look at older Francis Ngannou fights, we see that the guy has some submissions, in that arsenal as well. Really beautiful finish of Anthony Hamilton early in his UFC run, where he is in a standing rear waist cinch. He's able to lock up the arm, turn Anthony Hamilton through, get to knee on belly in the top position, and finish that Kimura. So Francis Ngannou has shown that, he does have a little bit of a multi-dimensional threat. It's been a long time since we've seen him have to use it, right? We've also seen that Francis, he cleans people up really fast. It's one of the, main factors that stands out. Francis has more UFC fights, right? More UFC experience, but he spent significantly less time in the octagon than Ciryl Gane. because Ciryl Gane tends to have these longer, drawn out 5-round type fights. So I think that, the way I was planning on getting started with this is just sharing my screen with you. We're going to go over some notes, some of the earlier fights. And if you guys have questions, you go ahead and ask them. But I'm otherwise just going to start talking about, where these guys came from and what we could take away from the tape study here. So I'm going back to sharing the screen, and bear with me. This is the first time I've used this technology on StreamYard, but I think we should start with Ciryl Gane, right? Because he's the favorite here. He's the one who's taking all the betting volume, and he seems to be the belle of the ball this week. We've got Ciryl Gane starts out, the first footage I was able to find against Bobby Sullivan in TKO, right? So we start off with a 0-0 fighter. And basically, guys, what you need to know here is that Ciryl Gane overwhelmed this guy. Sullivan was 24 pounds heavier, didn't really look like an athlete. I have in my notes, looks a little out of shape, much slower than Gane, very reactive. And so this was really an easy fight for Gane. He overwhelmed him with strikes and then finished him with some variation of like a 10-finger choke. But it did show that Ciryl Gane, looked much more composed than your average 0-0 fighter. But that being said, it was against a 1-1 Bobby Sullivan who wasn't altogether impressive. Where we start to see the real hype on Ciryl Gane is this fight right here against Adam Dyksa in TKO. This was scheduled for 5-minute rounds, and this is a guy who again has one professional bout to his name in mixed martial arts. He came from a Thai boxing background in France. I was able to watch some of that footage. Don't have as thorough notes on it, but what we know is that, Gane, very confident, comes out, likes to bully guys, likes to impose his will. It looks a lot different at this time. It looked a lot different when he was doing Thai boxing. Some of his more recent fights, we've seen a reserved Ciryl Gane where he stays back and he picks his shots, and he likes to, throw kicks in bursts. But he operates from behind the jab, and he moves a lot, and he feints and fakes and uses lateral footwork. And Ciryl Gane used to bully people around the cage. He'd come forward, he'd back you up into the ropes, he'd control you against the clinch. We've seen Ciryl Gane work people in those positions. And I think ultimately, this fight was decided by the fact that Gane was, in much better shape. Gane was able to keep a hellacious pace on this guy, and he did a lot of damage. This is one of the fights where Gane is able to do a lot of damage. We see it end with a spinning back fist. This is one of the huge highlights. If you ever watch Ciryl Gane early fight career highlights, he gets a spinning back fist, floors the guy, and then ends up finishing him in really dominant fashion. With a hellacious barrage against the fence. So this is when people started to know this guy is for real. And then we see that Ciryl Gane takes on Roger Souza. This is a bit of a nothing fight. If you watch the fight, guys, Roger Souza, very upright, very slow, not moving his head very much, eating a lot of shots, absorbing them cleanly on the chin, not moving, with any semblance of elite level footwork. And so he got overwhelmed very quickly in that fight, ends up succumbing to strikes. And it was in the very first round. So again, this is the TKO scene. This is a Canadian regional MMA organization. It's not altogether the greatest fights in the world, but this is a pretty big deal to have a guy step up from, no professional mixed martial arts to 5-round fights at an early stage in his career. And so far, we're seeing Ciryl Gane come through with flying colors. And this is why people really like the guy, right? So then we see, UFC debut time. We're looking at Ciryl Gane here, Bon Gamin. And this is, when we look, Rafael Pessoa, right? We're looking at 2019. This is when we see the rise of Ciryl Gane. He comes into the UFC, check me out, minus 500, okay? And if you guys have ever seen Rafael Pessoa fight, this shouldn't come as a tremendous surprise to you, right? Rafael Pessoa, a little bit slower, a little bit more reactive. Again, one of these heavier set heavyweights. Gane is like 240, muscled up, looks kind of like an action figure, 6'4", 6'5", on that precipice. And so he's a very good archetype for this mobile heavyweight, whereas a lot of these guys, especially that he's fighting early on in his MMA career, they're the larger, heavier set. Roy Nelson, think of those kind of heavyweights, Mark Hunt types. And this is, Pessoa is maybe one of the bigger grappling threats that Gane has faced, which is, kind of hysterical because Gane is able to bully him around. He's hitting him with the powerful jab, like we mentioned, and Pessoa is getting wild. He's afraid to engage. And it was a lazy trip from Pessoa that allows Gane to actually counter him, trip, get on top, and finish with the arm triangle choke. So just like I mentioned, big old Francis got some of those submissions in his arsenal. It's been rare to see it, at a high level, but against these lower level heavyweights, we've seen Ciryl Gane have some success implementing a grappling game plan. We saw this head and arm triangle choke, and we're going to see a couple more examples of it in the Ciryl Gane tape. So as we look up here, another example right away, we've got the Don'Tale Mayes fight. Guys, this one's a really strange fight. If you've never watched it, I encourage you to go back and watch it. It looks nothing like the Don'Tale Mayes, who was power face effing Josh Parisian in his last UFC bout, guys. Way different. Don'Tale Mayes can actually match some of the physical dimensions of Gane, but he fights a really silly fight. He's doing a lot of spins. He's wasting a ton of energy, a lot of low percentage spinning back kicks and stuff. So I felt like Mayes had some things he was working successfully. When he was boxing, he was landing some shots, but I felt like he didn't commit to anything in particular. And so he kind of just got stuck hanging out in that mid-range where Gane is picking him apart. So we skip forward to round 3. Gane tends to systemically break these guys down over time. So we see, Gane looks massive in the fight despite being the lighter guy. And he gets on top, and it was hysterical, guys. He falls back. I have in my notes here, nonsense heel hook wouldn't work at Renzo Gracie of Warwick. And, I kind of stand by that. Like, yes, that works at the very low level in a heavyweight fight where the other guy's grappling is susceptible and where he's already mentally broken in the battle on the feet. But I felt like, there was no attempt to leg pummel. There was no attempt to counter. There was no attempt to kick away on the ass. And it just seemed like there could have been a better effort, a better resistance from Don'Tale Mayes there. Certainly Francis Ngannou, who got power halved by Stipe Miocic for 15 minutes of a 25-minute fight where he was completely gassed, doesn't seem like a candidate who would take an easy way out in any kind of cage fight. But we can continue along this Ciryl Gane fight tape. It was another impressive showing. It was another submission finish. So he's showing, a diverse arsenal, well-rounded game, absolutely beating these guys up on the feet, controlling the fight, finding takedowns at times. And this is a fight where, again, I mentioned Gane is actually 2 inches shorter. He's 2 years older than Don'Tale Mayes. But they were at reach parity. That is one of the things that's impressive about Ciryl Gane. He's got a long reach. Can almost match Francis Ngannou in that department. Not quite, as we will discuss later. But here we go. Next fight up in the UFC, we've got Tanner Boser. And this is before Tanner Boser was Tanner Boser. He kind of had that moment in the sun. And I like Tanner Boser. I think he's a fun guy. Doesn't have the style to beat somebody like a Ciryl Gane. He's kind of like a Ciryl Gane light when you look at Tanner Boser. He's got, the leg kick game. He's got a little bit of that in and out movement. He can move his head a little bit. He can throw some pitter patter boxing while he commits. He can throw a committed hook or two and land with some authority. But for the most part, he's going to leg kick you. He's going to move around. He's going to touch you with a little bit of volume. And he's going to try and stick and move on the outside. Ciryl Gane is much better at that. He's much faster. He's a little longer. He's a little bigger. He's actually a heavyweight than Tanner Boser by, almost 15 pounds. So Tanner Boser, uphill battle in that fight. And when we go back and we refer to the tape for this matchup, I see Tanner Boser plus 425 underdog. Guys, he looked like it from start to finish. I think, I actually have in my notes weight parity for Gane. Man, it didn't look like it out there. Holy smokes. Gane, he's controlling the center. He's landing the combination successfully. He's not getting hit frequently. He's checking with the hook. He's using his intercepting knee to the body to cause bad reactions. And my score was 30-25 here. I thought that you could have easily scored the second and third round there, 10-8 for Ciryl Gane. officially, that was 3 by 30-26. So Ciryl Gane at this lower level of the heavyweight competition, he's not doing what Francis Ngannou is doing and dispatching guys in the first round, but he's systemically beating them over the course of a fight, whether that's 12 and a half minutes to a submission or whether that's a 15-minute decision. In the case of Tanner Boser, where it was an absolute rout. All judges agreed that he had at least one 10-8 round, in the fight. So showing the dominance of Ciryl Gane, justifying those huge prices, So we see just so far in his UFC run, minus 500 versus Pessoa, minus 260 against Dante Mays, minus 600 against Tanner Boser. And this is when he's 5-0 as a professional. So people have been hip to the fact that this guy, Ciryl Gane, is a special fighter for quite some time. Want to shout out my man Daz Files in the comments, says, agree, Eric, just take a jab hook on the way in, but explode forward, close eyes, and swing for Rosendreich style. Hey, guys, that's one way to approach it, but I think Francis Ngannou has a little bit more technicality than people give him credit for. And again, we're going to get to that when we discuss Francis in the tape here. If anybody has thoughts on Ciryl Gane, anything I've missed, any questions you have, please go ahead and fire them away in the chat. I'm interested to hear what you have to say as well. But next we see a big step up in competition, right? So we go from Ciryl Gane, he's fighting the Rafael Pessoas of the world, the Dante Mazes, the Tanner Bosers. Has a bunch of canceled bouts here in a row. That's what I wanted to highlight. It seems like a lot of guys didn't want to fight this fight. Gane withdraws from the Shamil fight. Then Pavlovich withdraws. Then Abdurakhimov withdraws. Then Deligi has contract issues. So, can't really get this guy in the freaking cage. So now we get Junior Dos Santos, right? Former champion, for Ciryl Gane to fight. And, this is another dominant performance, for Ciryl Gane, but not one without its moments. So Ciryl Gane comes in a massive favorite here. I'll highlight it for you, minus 455 coming into this fight. This is on the UFC 256 Figgy versus Moreno 1 card, ironically enough. I just wanted to highlight that there. So this is in 2020, December. We're seeing good feints, good fakes from Gane, convincing ADS. We're seeing that, Gane controls the center of the octagon a lot. It's the thing that's impressive about Ciryl Gane. He controls where fights take place. He controls at what pace a fight is fought more often than not. And so Ciryl Gane, is a ring general in that way. And for somebody who is so young in their combat sports career, that's what really stands out about Ciryl Gane. That's what makes him seem so special. That's why analysts rave about this guy, is because he came into the game and with very little experience started dictating terms to people. We're going to fight like this. We're going to fight at this range. We're going to fight at this pace. And that's really impressive, especially against the quality of opposition he's been able to do it against. Right here, it's his first UFC title challenge, and obviously it's not for the belt, but this is a former titleist, a former title challenger multiple times in Junior Dos Santos. And we see that Gane is able to go inside, outside, pointing him up with leg kicks, winning the early round. And then Gane uses his lead hand to control, to obstruct, to manage that distance. It's people talk about managing distance. We don't always talk about what tools they're using, but he does a lot of hand traps. He'll fight with that lead hand. He'll paw out towards you, right? And I think that that's part of what he uses to distract. It's part of what he uses to frame. It's part of what he uses to measure for those kicks that he's throwing constantly. So Ciryl Gane, clever fighter, got a lot of tools, and trying to highlight some of those as we go along here. We've also got Gane decent enough at getting those clinch entries. He does this in a lot of his fights. He comes in, he throws a lot of strikes, but then he'll just clinch you up. He'll wrap up an overhook, he'll wrap up an underhook, he'll turn you against the fence a little bit, he'll weigh on you, he'll try and wrap up your arms. And I think that this is, not a guy that we're going to see, leave any avenue on the table. I think when he's trying to fight Francis, he's going to try and put this guy in the clinch too. Look at Big Francis, right? He's got big muscles. You want to try and get those arms working. We know that Ciryl Gane can pace himself over 5 rounds. He has proven that against these upper echelon guys in the division. So we've got to keep that in mind. We've got to think, how is that going to translate against Big Francis? But we also got to respect, what has this guy shown? He's shown growth, and he's shown an ability to fight in a lot of the positions that are critical in MMA. He can fight in the clinch as well. And the finish came off of a Gane jab. He follows up with the right hand. He throws a clinch knee and then smashes him with that big elbow to the side of the head. Junior protested, thought it was to the back of the head, didn't like how it was going, and didn't like the call there, but, thought it was a clean stoppage. In my own right, it was an incidental hit to the back of the head. And I think that this is the coming out party for Ciryl Gane. This is when guys start to realize he comes through as a minus 500 against JDS and looks every bit of it, dispatches him in clean fashion. And so I'm going to shout out my man Bout Better in the comment section. Says, I think Ngannou is going to brawl him and blitz him. That's very possible. I think that's going to be a critical part of the Ngannou game plan. Gane is a big man, no doubt about it. He can match Francis, like I mentioned, in some of those physical components. Not quite as much in terms of the weight, but in the frame, the size. He's only got a 2-inch reach deficit in this fight to Ciryl Gane. And he's at a height parity with Francis Ngannou. You see him variously listed at 6'4" and 6'5". I reckon he's somewhere in between there. Maybe he's a half inch, an inch taller than Francis. I don't think it matters. I think it's a little bit of a wash there. But, yeah, both big guys, both powerful, both fast, both athletic. A lot of upside on both guys, really tremendous athletes. Bout Better says Ngannou may even initiate the grappling, not just clinching, but grappling. I think that he'd be foolish not to, mix it up in that regard. A lot of times you see Ciryl Gane being the guy who's taking it to his opponent. Francis Ngannou, who's been training in the United States, who's had a lot of wrestling looks, who was able to take down Stipe Miocic, people forget. I think that maybe that's something he's going to try and incorporate here, at least as a threat, a level change, something else to keep Gane guessing, to keep him moving backwards where he's a little bit less effective. And shout out Daniel Edwards in the comments, says, well said, Bout. Gane matches Ngannou's frame like no other. Hey, fair enough, boys. So we're going to move right along here. We've got, a couple more fights for Francis Ngannou in the UFC, and this is the one that comes up a lot because, it's maybe the closest analog stylistically to Francis Ngannou. We got a Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Excuse me. Rapid fire over here. Needed a quick sip of the coffee. But I think that, Jairzinho, he's got a lot of power, throws that leg kick, off the lead, likes to back himself onto the fence at times. Not a tremendously high volume guy, but can pace himself to go 25 minutes by, picking sporadic bursts of offense. I think that this was a fight that was a pretty thorough route, for Ciryl Gane, because he's able to fill the gaps in Jairzinho's fights with volume in ways that a lot of heavyweights are not able to do. And so he was able to make Jairzinho look really bad by filling a lot of that time. And on top of that, Gane is pretty good at intercepting linear bursts, linear attacks. And so if you just come forward at him on a straight line, he's going to put a round kick to the body on you by framing off. He is going to put a teep kick to the body in your breadbasket. Or he's going to come up the middle with that intercepting knee. And so I think that Ciryl Gane showed a lot in this fight, showed that he could pace himself over 25 minutes. But I also want to point out that, if I bring up, let's go to UFC stats.com and see what we come up with here. Because I have a sneaky feeling that Ciryl Gane didn't land a tremendous amount of volume there. So against Jairzinho Rozenstruik, he lands 102 strikes. How many of those are leg kicks? Yeah, 46 of 61. So, almost half of the lands for Gane in that fight are leg kicks. So I think it would be foolish to assume that we don't get, a leg kick heavy approach from Gane in this fight as well. I think that Daniel Edwards, again in the comment section, making a great point, says Jair is also an awful wrestler. Gane did great level changes on him as well. That's an excellent point. And I think that Francis is much better in terms of his defensive wrestling capabilities than Jairzinho, especially given what Jairzinho showed in that fight. not a tremendous get-up game, not a tremendous takedown defense system. Oftentimes gets his weight caught over his heels. And I don't think his cage takedown defense is very good either. Francis, on the other hand, tends to build a wide base, tends to get underhooks. Like I mentioned in the Anthony Hamilton fight, ripped a Kimura that he was able to then finish from top position, starting from, the negative position in a rear waist cinch. So, Francis is going to be a different puzzle from a takedown perspective. But I do think, this is a fight where Ciryl Gane, showed he could deal with somebody with power. He could do a lot of damage by keeping himself at distance. And we see that Ciryl Gane, very varied striker, 60+% of his shots are not going to the head in that fight. And, Francis tends to have pretty good reactive head movement where he'll fire off explosive counters. It's going to be interesting to see how Francis deals with the approach of Ciryl Gane, who tends to target these other avenues on the body, who tends to do more attritional work, who tends not to rush looking for a finish by trying to head strike somebody out of there in the first round. He normally looks to pick them apart slowly over time and do damage to things like their wheel, can't get around on their leg, do things like, taking away some of that energy, sapping the breadbasket, making them cover up down low so he can open up those high kick opportunities. So I think that this was a fight that was a good showing, but, need I remind you guys, the fans were booing relentlessly. This was a fight where Gane was roundly criticized for not doing more, for not seizing a finish, for not capitalizing. He kind of cruise controlled it with Jairzinho in that fight. Jairzinho really was the one I thought who could be blamed for not really doing much. He didn't really offer Gane much resistance, but, he didn't get submitted. That was something to me that showed that, if you have a baseline of basic defense and you don't quit on yourself over the course of the fight, that Ciryl Gane is not the most dangerous submission threat, that we've ever seen. But, alas, he gets the win. It's a dominant 5-round decision. Another one of those fights where Ciryl Gane looks like an absolute killer from beginning to end. This is a fight where he's the younger guy. He was at height parity. He has the reach advantage. He was a little bit smaller, but he danced around him. He landed all the big shots. He won every round cleanly, and every judge agreed with that. So 50-45 across the board, really dominant win and an important win as well for Ciryl Gane. So now we get to the fights that are a little bit more interesting, right? That last fight that we discussed against Jairzinho, he was still minus 270, right? So now let's get into this competitive fight territory where we're fighting Alexander Volkov. Right now, the market that respects Ciryl Gane tremendously has gotten down to minus 155, right? The same price actually that we see right now virtually for the Ngannou fight. And so I think that this is another fight that's instructive that we've got to look at, that we've got to analyze, that we got to try to understand. So we've got Alexander Volkov here. Volkov, if you guys haven't seen this fight, again, I'd encourage you to watch it. Don't just take my word for it. But I'm going to just click over to the UFC stats portion one more time because I think it's going to be super instructive in this fight. And Alexander Volkov versus Ciryl Gane, we click into the fight, and what do we see? By target, 48% of the shots for Alexander Volkov are to the leg, guys. 50% of his shots are to the leg. And so he had a really tough time even imagining winning this fight because the whole time he's throwing these pitter-patter leg kicks inside, outside, landed a lot of them, wasn't able to slow down Ciryl Gane very effectively, wasn't really able to limit his movement. And so he landed, a bunch of leg kicks, a bunch of slapping leg kicks, but he really absorbed a lot of damage up top that made him hesitant, right? And he was eating shots to the body as well. He was eating those low-line side kicks, linear kicks as well to the front of his knee. And so he was having a hard time advancing. But when we saw Volkov throw punches in combination, we were able to see Volkov get through. We saw Volkov land some shots. We saw Volkov, get through on a couple clean punches. Here's the thing about Volkov, right? Volkov's kind of like Gane in the sense that he doesn't really hit you with one punch that makes you forget everything. Volkov likes to do damage over time, land, touchy, and then get you to quit, get you to give up, get you out of there by accumulating a volume of strikes. That's not really what he had an opportunity to do in this fight. The better attritional work was done by Ciryl Gane. And so it really was a tough uphill battle for our man in this fight. So I think when we go back, we look at Ciryl Gane against Volkov. This is a fight where he's 3 inches shorter, but he still has that 1-inch reach advantage, right? Volkov, big, tall, long guy. Not really the same body type archetype that we're looking at in a matchup with Francis. However, still a lot of important things to take away here. Volkov got hurt in that 3rd round, I believe. But I thought that it was questionable that he won the 4th round. Ciryl Gane was in the center for a lot, but that was when you saw the most effective lands with those straight punches from Volkov. I thought that it was close. I thought that not the whole fight, obviously. Ciryl Gane, was running away with it at portions. But I thought this 4th round became very close, and it was one of those signs that when facing resistance, we may see Ciryl Gane slow down just a bit more. It's one thing to walk somebody around the octagon like Jairzinho Rozenstruik and have them not throw back. But it's another thing when Volkov, threw a high volume of strikes. The problem was they were to the wrong targets to win hearts and minds. They were to the wrong targets to do visible damage. And really, he wasn't able to get the respect. It seems like Ciryl Gane, pretty durable guy, pretty tough guy, didn't really give a reaction to most of the low kicks, even though he absorbed a ton of them over the course of the fight. So I think you got to do damage. You got to really hurt this guy. You got to back up Gane. You got to knock him down. Got to get him off his game. And Volkov was too content to move backwards. I've heard a lot of commentary from people about the big cage, the small cage. A lot of these fights that Ciryl Gane has had are actually in that small cage. I think it was the big cage against Derrick Lewis, but we see the small cage against Volkov, and we saw the small cage as well against who is the guy? I think it was a small cage against Jairzinho. I'd have to double check that, but either way, I think that we see a guy who excels, in the small cage in Ciryl Gane. I know that's going to sound crazy. People are going to say, "Oh, Liam, what are you talking about?" But I've seen it where this guy pushes people into the fence, controls them there. He controlled Jairzinho there for portions. He lands big thudding knees. He can do a lot of damage. He can unload on people on the fence. If they fall down, if he knocks them down along the fence line, we've seen him get brutal finishes with the uppercuts, with the elbows, dropping hammers, using the guillotine, the 10-finger choke. So Ciryl Gane is dangerous when he can press somebody into that fence. It's actually when the fight is in open space at times, you see Ciryl Gane run into some challenges. He's got good evasive footwork, that's for sure. But I have seen when he's willing to get in these pocket exchanges and throw back, extend the combination, try and land his own hooks behind the shots that they're throwing. He's got a lot of confidence in his chin. He's got a lot of confidence in his, pocket boxing and his head movement and his reactions, as he should. He's very good. But, I think in a matchup with somebody who's got a 2-inch reach advantage like Francis, that could be a little bit scary. There were exchanges here where Volkov landed punches and combinations that if Francis Ngannou land them, it could really make a difference. It could really send you into a new orbit. Whereas Volkov, again, wasn't able to land an accumulation of strikes to the head or the body that would have really made Gane eligible for stoppage there. So I think Gane is clever. He's got a great jab. He worked behind that very effectively in this fight. And really dissuaded Volkov from engaging him at that boxing range for a lot of the fight. But when they did, Volkov was able to get off on some shots of his own. He just wasn't able to match that kicking volume from Ciryl Gane, and he was getting really torched, I thought, by the counter leg kicks. Gane wasn't any of them, but when he threw them, they landed with a lot of power, and Volkov is already a slower, plodding, walk around step-based fighter, whereas Gane is a bouncy movement, in and out. And, he just moves in more directions. Volkov's a lot more content to stand on 2 feet and exchange. And so I thought that was, ultimately what led to his downfall in that fight, because he didn't have anything to get that respect from Gane, so he ultimately absorbed more damage than he could sustain over the course of the fight. We see that my score for this fight was 49-46 or 50-45. Everybody's talking about this guy Gane has never lost a round. That's fair. I could see it. I also could see the argument that he did lose that fourth round against Volkov. I thought it was a close round, close-ish portion of the fight. There was competitive moments, but yeah, I think that overall Ciryl Gane won the rounds that he won more decisively, and once again, comported himself like a very talented fighter would do. So now we move to the most recent fight, right? How did we get here? This is Francis Ngannou, stepping away, saying, hey, guys, I'm on vacation. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. Whatever it is, crossed wires with the UFC. This leads us to this situation we're in, right? We have a champion in Francis Ngannou. We have an interim champion in Ciryl Gane because he beat Derrick Lewis in Houston, Texas for that interim championship. And so I wanted to talk about this fight, break it down as well, because this is one where it's, again, that coming out party. Why does the public love Ciryl Gane? They just saw it recently, right? Francis Ngannou, I'm going to click over to his Tapology briefly, right? I look at Francis Ngannou. When's the last time he fought? Stipe Miocic, March 27th of 2021, as you guys can see right here, UFC 260, right? We're about to be at UFC 270. And meanwhile, on the other side, we got Ciryl Gane. When's the last time he fought? UFC 265. This is a what have you done for me lately business, guys. So people are remembering Ciryl Gane, he was 5 pay-per-views ago. Francis Ngannou, who the hell is that guy? I haven't seen him in 10 pay-per-views. I haven't seen him in a year. He might as well be a guy I've never heard of before. So I think that this is something we got to keep in mind. What is our own recency bias going to play into our expectations for this fight? I think something that career retrospectives can help you battle that instinct, right? Now I've seen everything. I've gone on this whole journey with Ciryl Gane. So where did we ultimately get to? We started at a pretty good point. We're ending at, beating up Derrick Lewis, and great accomplishment. One of the most decorated UFC heavyweights of all time, the UFC heavyweight knockout king. But we've got to put it in context, right? We've got Ciryl Gane taking on Derrick Lewis. We're going to pop over to the Derrick Lewis Tapology briefly, right? And put ourselves just in proper context, right? So we had, going into that fight, a 1, 2, 3, 4 fight win streak for my man Derrick Lewis, okay? He beats Blagoy Ivanov by split decision. Could have went either way. Then we see that my man Derrick Lewis, he beats Ilir Latifi again in a fight that could have gone really either way. We see that Derrick Lewis beats Alexei Olenek in a fight where he was getting, dominated on the ground at various points by Alexei Olenek. I was scared. I was like, are you serious, Derrick? I thought it was all over at that point. And then we see Derrick Lewis come through with that bus driver uppercut, absolutely shocking, tremendous, one of the best knockouts you'll ever see, one of the most horrific knockouts you'll ever see. It is harrowing. Guys, if you watch that on UFC Fight Pass, you can hear after the fact that my man Curtis Blaydes is like, for like 3 minutes after the contest. It is a brutal knockout. Derrick Lewis hits in ways that people can't fathom, right? However, Derrick Lewis, not the fastest guy on the planet, right? Basically likes to set up everything on that right hand. You occasionally will see Derrick use that left hand to work a little bit. Most of what he's doing is off that right hand. It's off that big jumping switch kick. He's got a lot of explosivity to his game. He uses the jumping switch kick to back you up, and then he fires in with that right hand that can drop anybody. He could throw it as an uppercut. He could throw it as an overhand, and he can really do a lot of damage with it. But this is a fight where Derrick Lewis admittedly came out flat. He did not look like himself. Didn't look like he wanted to be there. And we've seen that from Derrick before, unfortunately. I'm not trying to be a jerk about it. Derrick Lewis is everybody's, one of their favorite fighters. I love Derrick Lewis. Freaking hysterical on social media. But you got to call a spade a spade. And Derrick Lewis sometimes is in a fight where he's like, I don't think I'm going to win. I don't want to be here. And I'm going to look for a way out. And I felt like in that fight, he didn't look for many ways in. Every time he tried to, find his way into the fight, he couldn't get he got the door slammed in his face again. So he just sat on the outside, got picked apart for a little while, looked around, went, "Oh yeah, I've done enough time here. Get me out of here, so I don't have to keep facing the the faces of these Houstonians that I'm just letting down." And I really believe that Derrick Lewis is a tremendous talent, and great for the heavyweight division, great for the promotion of the UFC. But he's just that one tier below the most elite heavyweights, and kind of always has been. He lost to JDS at like that. That's like the most recent, big win for JDS is like beating Derrick Lewis by finish, right? If you're a fast boxer that can keep him at distance and not fall for the voodoo bullshit, you can normally beat this guy. And I know what you're thinking, which is Francis Ngannou lost to this guy, Derrick Lewis, by doing nothing. And I know, but I think that was a mental problem for Francis. We haven't seen Francis fight like that since. Right? We saw Francis fight like that one time after the Stipe fight. He ran out of gas in a 25-minute fight. He comes back. He's asked to take on this tough challenge, right? Basically, a guy who's got the same skill set as you. He can touch you and you die. So it's like now Francis doesn't really want to engage like crazy. So he's staying on the outside. He's thinking, what do I do here? How do I approach this guy? And I think that, man, like when I look at this, I see Derrick Lewis as the kind of guy that is a tough challenge for anybody, right? He's a tough gatekeeper, but stylistically, he is a much easier fight for somebody like Ciryl Gane than somebody like Francis Ngannou. It's almost like a mirror match when you see a Francis Ngannou and a Derrick Lewis, two guys that can kill you with one nuke. So you really better everybody stay back, right? And that's why they didn't engage at all. That's why we all expected the best fight in UFC history, and instead both guys are standing back. Neither one is incentivized to come forward. Because if you get hit, you get knocked out, and it's embarrassing, right? So instead, both guys, pitter patter from the outside, maybe throw a couple jabs, maybe throw a couple low kicks, maybe a couple jumping kicks in the body for Derrick Lewis, and he stole it on that. It's like there really wasn't anything that happened in that fight, to be honest with you. So I don't rate that fight as very significant, but this fight I do rate as significant because it's one of the most impressive showings that we've seen from Ciryl Gane. So Lewis starts in orthodox, right? Gane is in the southpaw position, but you'll see Ciryl Gane, guys, float in and out. He is not stuck to one position. But this is where we got to think about where are openings for a power puncher to land. Maybe in the constant transition from one stance to another stance. Gane likes to be offensive and switch stances through his offense. Here's the problem. Every time I switch stances, I have to be now trying to put my defense in a new position. I have to now be thinking, what are the new threats? Conversely, my opponent's got to do the same thing, right? So now he's got to think, what can I do to attack this guy? He's now a southpaw. What can I do to attack him now? He's standing orthodox. So that's going to be, the question mark here. But I think, again, what have we seen from Ciryl Gane that makes people so freaking impressed with the guy? Gane's patient kickboxing frustrates Derrick Lewis, right? And that's what people are banking on. They're not banking on Ciryl Gane's going to come out here and hit Francis with the death touch in one punch and he's going to die. Nobody who's picking Ciryl Gane for the most part thinks that's going to happen, right? They think that this guy is going to frustrate him with a slow, drawn-out kickboxing approach. Gane will talk a little shit in there. He's saying, let's go. He's saying a lot of things. He kind of just will talk. Bongamin, that nickname they give him is about smiling, right? It's about this guy who comes in and he's always smiling. You see him at the press conference, he looks a little goofy, right? But I think that he's really a cerebral guy. Ciryl Gane, when you're smiling in somebody's face, constantly pressuring them, that's annoying. That's gonna set you off. That's gonna piss you off a little bit, make you want to swing at this smiling head of mine that I can move, that I can make you miss more often than if you're swinging at this big, long torso I have, or at these massive tree trunks I call legs. So I think that Ciryl Gane uses these little tactics, these little subtleties of the game to try and draw out that anger, that, whiplash, really to just an emotional reaction. That's what he wants from you in that fight. He's trying to keep it totally base level. Right? I'm just here. I'm chilling. I'm moving. I'm grooving. I got a smile on my face. How is that going to factor when Francis Ngannou is running at you like a madman, though? That's, again, where it becomes, Ciryl Gane, cool cucumber. What happens when he becomes the guy in the pressure cooker? Can he stand up to that? That's a more interesting question, right? And I think that's where, this fight is going to be fought along that fine line. This is a really fascinating, fight for that reason. So we're going to get back to this tape here to finish out Ciryl Gane. I had round one of the Lewis fight, a 10-8 round for Ciryl Gane. Lewis is not landing punches. Gane is landing impactful shots. He's got the snappy front kicks. He's going with the head kicks. He's going with the kicks to the body. He's using the stiff jab. He just did everything you'd want to see on the feet, controlled the fight, controlled the distance, controlled the range. Here's the crux of the fight. Lewis is not willing to move forward on Gane. Gane is strong, big, powerful, fast, athletic. That, my friends, is the question of this fight. Will Francis Ngannou get stuck watching? Will he get stuck on the outside? Will he be, stuck in this mirror match, the dancing, the game of Ciryl Gane? Or is he going to come forward with reckless abandon and put this guy on the back foot? Because if he does that, this is a fight that becomes incredibly interesting, incredibly quickly, right? We see Ciryl Gane walk people down, be the measured guy, be the feared guy in almost all of his fights. I'm not saying there's going to be a component of fear here, but who has ever stood their ground when Big Francis was coming towards them and lived to tell the tale, right? I think that this is, I go back and watch. When I think of guys that set their feet, we're going to talk about it in the Francis tape. Man, it has fared extremely poorly by and large for the guys that have opted to do that. But again, we'll talk about that for Francis. Let's finish out this fight right here. We've got first round, I got 10-8 for Ciryl Gane. Second round, I had 10-9 for Ciryl Gane. Derrick was at least throwing something, trying to clinch, trying to wrestle, trying to do something to mix up the fight, but couldn't really get much going. Gane controls the terms of engagement, right? He controls where the fight's being fought. He's landing body shots. He's pressuring Lewis back. And really, another underthought about part of the game is that my man, Derrick Lewis, brick for the head, soft to the body. Guys that have targeted Derrick Lewis to the body have had much more success than the guys that have aimed for that big brick of a head. And even still, some guys have been able to rock and hurt Derrick, but most of the time you got to change levels, dip to that body. JDS did it beautifully, boxed him up to the body and was able to find the finish. So we look ahead to round 3. This is where we get the finish. Gane is picking him apart with low kicks. He's switching stances, prodding him, poking him, bothering him, right? Gane is using traps. He looks for the step-in elbow. Lewis tries to take him down, can't get it. Lewis constantly getting backed up behind the two black lines. That is critical. Ciryl Gane loves when somebody's fighting from behind the two black lines. He pins him against the fence. He doesn't let him move so easily. He can unload with those big kicks, uncork them to the head, to the body, to the legs, keep you trapped, fire in those jumping knees, the intercepting knees. Gane is a dangerous fellow, and he uses that big body of his, all the tools that he has. He uses them pretty effectively, and he especially used them in this fight against Derrick Lewis. Big looping shots. He controls head position very well for somebody that doesn't come from a wrestling background. He's got a sharp uppercut. He's got an excellent counter right hook. He ends up landing a big knee that causes a pause to the action. Lewis loses his mouthpiece. Classic Lewis move. Brilliant step and high kick lands. And then the right hand counter drops Lewis. Gane on the back, dropping hammer fist, gets the finish. Brutal combinations. Again, this is Derrick Lewis in his hometown in Houston, Texas, gets dispatched in brutal fashion by Ciryl Gane. It was a really tremendous performance. There's a reason why there's a lot of hype on this guy, Ciryl Gane, coming into this fight. Want to engage with the chat a little bit. I know that we've got a lot of people in here bantering back and forth. Great notes. Extremely high quality breakdown from my man Prodigy, one of the best in the game. If you're not following my man Prodigy, go ahead and find him on Twitter. You absolutely should do that. My man Gian in the comments says, Liam with the best breakdowns. Appreciate you for sure. Thou better ask, do I have a teleprompter? No, sir, my man. I do my research. I come in prepared. And on top of that, like you see, I compiled all these notes. I spent a lot of time thinking about it. So I come to you right off the dome piece with everything I got and just trying to to make your life a little easier, I go through a really deep tape study. I take notes a little bit more diligently than a lot of people in the space. And so if I can share something that'll help you guys analyze your bets a little bit better, then I'm happy to do it. And that's what I wanted to do tonight. So we're going to move right along, guys, because we also have Francis Ngannou to talk about. But here's the beautiful thing. Francis and Ngannou don't have them 5-round fights, every other line that you got to talk about a couple rounds deep. Francis Ngannou's got a lot of fights that are 3 sentences, and then you're all squared away. So appreciate everybody who's active in the chat right now. You guys are all, blessing me with your attention. I really appreciate it. And like I said, I'm going to hope to build on this with you guys here. If anybody wants access to these notes, as long as you can show me proof that you're subscribed and that you throw a like on this video, I'm happy to share my complete notes, over 30 pages in total, on these 2 fighters with you in exchange for you doing that little favor for me. So go ahead and like this video. If you haven't already, go ahead and get subscribed to the channel. I break down UFC fights from top to bottom from a betting perspective on a weekly basis. But this week, trying something a little different, doing a really deep dive on that main event, showing you all the work that goes into me writing these main event previews for Roto Grinders. Last week it was Calvin Kattar cashing as the plus 200. I told you guys that I felt good about Calvin Kattar in that spot. Calvin Kattar to win inside the distance didn't come through for us, but was very close. I thought we still had a solid read there. So overall, just trying to keep the trend going. Cashed a few main event underdogs in a row now for my friends at Roto Grinders. Just like I said, man, I want to keep this ball rolling and appreciate everybody who's supporting it and helping make this possible. If you guys think that you've got friends, people that would get value from this as well, go ahead and retweet the link. We're live on Twitter now, and we're going to be going for a little while here because we got Francis Ngannou to break down. So let's get started right off the top. We got my man, Francis Ngannou. We're going to go all the way back to the beginning, guys, because this is what I like to do to get us acquainted. Who is this guy, right? Francis Ngannou versus Luke Negleka. This fight is one of the earlier ones on Francis's record that I can find video of. This is when Francis was 3-1 as a professional against a 1-0 opponent, and he ends up just putting this guy away pretty quick. So inside low kick from Francis takes the guy off his feet. We're seeing early on this guy Francis has different kind of power. Flailing hooks seems to hurt Luke, drops him, panic wrestling early on. Francis not defending with the correct technique, right? Even at this time, we see Francis as a super raw talent. But what he is doing that's super impressive is that this guy Francis Ngannou is freaking he's got natural hips, right? And wrestlers will know what I'm talking about, but there's this certain component to wrestling that's about techniques. Put your hand here, put your foot here. And there's certain things that are about feel. Do this when he does this. Move here when he does this. Give him this reaction. And hitting people with your hips, putting your hips into theirs, controlling situations with your hips is critical in these wrestling components. And Francis Ngannou, even in these early fights, even with limited professional experience, he's able to have good natural balance. He's able to hit people with hips. He threatened the guillotine. And then on his second attempt, right? So he basically attempts it. The guy pulls his head out. He gets it back in, and he finishes, right? So he gets the choke, gets the guy out of there with a guillotine. Francis Ngannou, I'm going to just refer really quick to his Tapology page because they have the simplest percentage-based breakdown here, guys. But 25% of his career wins by submission, right? I mentioned the Anthony Hamilton one. We're going to get to that. That's in the UFC, but he also has some wins regionally by submission. So again, we talk about these guys as one-dimensional. No, I'm not saying that we have to respect the grappling game of Luke Negleka because I don't know who that is. But what I am saying is Francis showing early on multiple components of the game, some wrestling elements, some grappling elements, some of the right things that you'd want to see from a prospect, from somebody on the come up, right? So then we see Francis Ngannou versus William Balduti. And this is a Vale Tudo match. This is 3-by-3 minute round, as best I understood it from the, I believe it's all written in French. And Francis is bouncing. He's shifting, firing the jab. He's using frames well. Not elite defense by any means, but tremendous championship level confidence. Ngannou is not afraid to engage. One of the things that's hard to teach these MMA fighters is aggression. How are you going to respond? Are you going to be able to come forward, be aggressive? And the thing that is so compelling about this matchup, guys, is both Ciryl Gane and Francis Ngannou so far in their careers have been extremely confident in coming forward and being aggressive. So the question is, who will take the back step, right? Who is going to be the one to implement that game plan, be the one coming forward, be the one pressuring? Or is somebody going to opt to, hey, I want to be the counterpuncher. I want to be on the back foot. I want to concede some ground here to land my big shots, because we have seen both those guys play around with elements of range. And we'll talk about that as well as we keep going here. So, ironically, guys, I thought this was hysterical. Francis looks like Usman here, pressing the opponent into the fence, controlling with knees, punches, kicks to the thigh. You don't think of it now because Francis now, lines up the kill shot and gets people out of there really rapidly in a lot of his recent fights. That just wasn't the case in this early fight. He does end up getting the guy out of there. He does end up blasting him, but he had a little bit more of that wrestling, grappling, control-based approach. Francis gives up a takedown, going for his own. He attempts an outside trip, loses position, gets stuck underneath the guy, but then Francis able to sit up towards an underhook, sweep it to full guard, standing to pass. We see Francis hits the big outside reap, able to get on top of his opponent, rain down some ground and pound from that mount position. And then he takes back turtle and starts throwing punches towards his opponent, who ends up tapping due to strikes. So again, Francis getting on top, landing a lot of big ground and pound. If you've seen Francis Ngannou's career, you have seen guys on the ground in that turtle position conceding defeat. They get hit by this guy. They go, what the hell was that? And they drop down, hands and knees, cover up their head, and look for the way out. And it's happened from the low level all the way up to the high level. So this was one where the guy literally felt the power, goes down, covers up. Referee's not getting him out of there fast enough. He's like, tap, 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 get me out of here. So I think that, this is, again, another example of, my man Francis coming through, getting on top, punishing somebody when he's able to get there and making good use of the position. So now we're going to see Francis Ngannou against Luis Henrique, right? And this is actually his UFC debut. So we started off with, a 1-0 opponent. Then we moved to 6-2 Baldudi. Now we move to 8-1 Luis Henrique. And Henrique comes into this matchup. We're going to see it in the tape here, touted as BJJ champion, Brazilian Muay Thai champion, Brazilian wrestling team. And Francis, meanwhile, is making his UFC debut. He's 29 years old. And Francis is much older, right? So we see Henrique, 22 years old. Francis is way bigger, though. He's got the 9-inch reach advantage. And this is where we see, guys, Francis not a normal size heavyweight, right? Francis is a big, big boy. He's got a long reach, and it's a problem for guys. Most guys that fight Francis can't match his reach, don't come close to matching his reach. And so that's something that we've got to be considering here as well. Want to shout out my man Isaac in the chat. Says, what did you think about the press conference? I thought it was horrible. Francis looked like a boss, though. Handled the French media guy well. Yeah, I try not to read too much into the press conferences, but I did take it in as a fan and as somebody who enjoys that and wanted to see, where both athletes are at. They both seem fine to me. They both seem prepared, ready to go. I thought it was kind of a crap press conference from an entertainment perspective. I thought that the, guy asking those silly questions just seemed a little bit like a jerk, but maybe there's something lost in translation. That often happens. So, more power to him. Francis looked great. Ciryl Gane looked like a guy who's in the background of a 2000s rap video, but he could fuck me up. So he's still the man. And I think that, both these guys, really tremendous fighters, really likable guys on the surface. Ciryl Gane filling the role of a bad guy here because he's like the company guy. He's the freaking the corporate establishment guy right now, whereas we got Francis kind of on the outs with the company, that anti-hero type role. And I try not to buy into those narratives too much, but yeah, Francis looked cool. calm, collected, and I think it's going to be a tremendous fight. The touch of fists at the end kind of told me it's more for the cameras than anything. These are both respectful, serious martial artists, but when they get in there, they're going to try and swing for the fences, fuck each other up. They're both serious guys, really serious competitors that want to win. And I thought that came through at the press conference as well. Want to shout out my man Bout Better says your narrative and writing is better. Hey man, I appreciate that, but it's freaking just it's my style. That's all. I do too much work. I write too many notes here. Most of the professional bettors that I know take significantly fewer notes. And guys, that may even be better for the long term. But this is to help you guys have a better, easier tape study. In case you forgot, hey, this is how we remember. Especially, I got ADHD. Right. So I'll remember something. I'll have a great thought. I'll forget it 10 minutes later. Hey, I don't want to do that. I want to write it all down, make sure I got it in notes, in record. And we got a lot of great stuff to work with here. So we'll continue on with the fight. Appreciate everybody rocking with us as well in the comments section. So Francis against Luis Henrique. This is where we see Francis, trying to address the fact he's going against a wrestler. He's carrying that lead hand low. He's firing a piston-like jab off. And we're seeing Francis do a nice job here where he basically gets taken down, but instantly is kicking away, trying to control posture, doing the right things when he gets taken down here early on. Like I said, controlling the posture, controlling the wrists, able to use his big feet, to get feet on hips, kick away, and get Henrique back up to his feet. And now we see Francis, not a tremendously active guard. If you want to criticize Francis, his submissions have been from the feet. He's not really he's not going to pull an armbar from the guard. That would be baffling to me as well as an observer. I don't think Francis is that kind of dynamic guard threat, but he's pretty good at sitting up to an underhook and finding his way back to his feet. So Francis, flat on his back, digs the underhook, and Henrique gets stood up. So this is a long time ago. We look back, this is 2015, December of 2015, and I don't know, I can't remember. I watched all the fights at this time. I can't remember if stand-ups were just more common then, or if this was as bad a stand-up then. But yeah, Henrique was getting stood up and separated from positions here, basically for no reason. So the question is, what could have been, if Luis Henrique had actually gotten this grind out, shitty wrestling decision over Francis Ngannou, what would the UFC look like today? But I do think, Ngannou took full advantage of the fact that the referees gave him separation. And so when he was at separation, Francis able to dig, lift the underhook, sneaks in a knee and another, Henrique pressing his hips to the fence, not level changing, not throwing volume, not doing damage. He's able to get on top. He's able to control a little bit. He's just not able to do very much that hurts Francis. And then we see Francis lands the 1-2, right hand lands flush, hurting Henrique. And so basically every guy we've seen fight Francis so far has been hurt and has been scared and has been panic wrestling a little bit. So one of the things that people have been talking about, from a grappling standpoint in this fight is the 100% takedown defense of Ciryl Gane. But Ciryl Gane has only faced 4 takedown attempts so far in the UFC. Francis Ngannou, on the other hand, has a 72% takedown defense rate, but he's faced 36 attempts just in the UFC. And he faced a ton of attempts regionally as well. So what I see is Francis basically has always been facing this wrestling threat from his opponents. You might be asking yourself, why aren't guys trying to offensively, proactively wrestle Ciryl Gane? And number one, he hasn't fought many wrestlers. I think that's critical to understand. Number two, though, and I think this is also important, guys get overwhelmed by Ciryl Gane because he gives you 50 things to think about, and he keeps touching you, and he'll pick up the volume and land some shots with more intensity as the fight goes on. But overall, it's this, burial by 1,000 cuts with Ciryl Gane that does a lot for him. Francis Ngannou touches people, and they go, I hope that you all can hear me. We're back, folks. Sorry about that brief technical difficulties. Really not sure what happened, but we got a little bit of inclement weather going on here at the LiamPicksFights studio. So that potentially has something to do with it, but hopefully you guys can hear me better now. If you can't hear me, please let me know in the comments section, and I will make sure I establish a better connection before we go forward. But we still got plenty of content here for you, breaking down this Francis Ngannou fight tape. So let me kick back over to it. We've got Francis basically in this fight, back to his feet, looks weathered, right? And it was Henrique that is just panic wrestling from the beginning here. The crowd's booing as Henrique just tries to press this guy to the fence, anything to keep from getting in a fist fight with him. And Francis chin in the eye to win the head position battle. So Francis, he's got that dirty, rotten competitor in him at the end of the day too. And then we see Francis here changing up the tempo as he backs him up, fires a fastball 1-2, a big uppercut as well. You see Francis lands the uppercut with tremendous power, and the uppercut may have broke the jaw because Henrique's face changed. It stiffened him cold. Guys, this is one of the better knockouts you'll see. So if you haven't seen it, go back and treat yourself by watching Francis Ngannou knock out Luis Henrique. Guys, that ended the hype train on Luis Henrique in a hurry. And it was a really impressive knockout. Henrique wrestled his ass off there, tried everything he could to stay on top of this guy. But Francis Ngannou's not an easy guy to hold down. He's a lot of muscle, a lot of physicality to deal with, and he's got some of those technical elements, right? He knows it's not complex stuff. He knows the basics he needs to do. He gets to that underhook. He wrestles his way up to his feet. So want to shout out Fukin MMA says, appreciate the late night show, Liam. Thanks, bud. Thank you, my friend. I appreciate you being here. And we're going to keep cruising along through this Francis Ngannou fight tape and see if we can find an edge to bet on these fights, right? So next up, guys, we've got Francis Ngannou. So if we look, Francis Ngannou here was minus 140 in that UFC debut against Luis Henrique, right? So we won't see those numbers again for a little while, you'd think, right? Let me check out what the odds were for Ngannou and Curtis Blaydes 1. So if you guys aren't aware, Ngannou has actually fought Curtis Blaydes twice, but he fought him the first time in 2016, April of 2016. Wow, and there it is, folks. That's hysterical. Francis Ngannou, the plus 145 underdog against Curtis Blaydes. So Francis, we see 4 years older, right? He's got a 3-inch reach advantage. They are at height parity. So Francis, that reach continues to be a theme. He's got a reach advantage in almost every fight that he's in. And we see Francis gets taken down early, but he shows again that decent get-up ability. He looks spent by the 4-minute mark, right? And this is the other thing. We see a lot of criticism of the Francis Ngannou cardiovascular base. I get it. But you got to have reasonable expectations with these guys too. Not every fighter is going to be able to implement the same game plan, going to be able to use their attributes the same way. This guy, Francis Ngannou, is not going to be, a marathon runner, right? Have you ever seen the guy? Yeah, he doesn't look like he's built for running marathons. He looks like he's built for doing other stuff, right? He's a sprinter by that same analogy. So when Francis Ngannou gets to going, he goes fast, he goes hard, and he does damage. He's like a sledgehammer. Really, in terms of his functionality. So I really think that people, sometimes misapply what tools are really beneficial. What I think is impressive is that we see Francis, sort of deal with the fact that he doesn't have that tremendous cardio base and still go 25 minutes on heart, passion, cardio, chin. I think that to me, durability is really impressive. Because a lot of guys with much better cardio bases will find ways out of fights in ways that Francis Ngannou, who had a poor cardio base, never looked for a way out. So something that impressed me about Francis. But again, we'll continue here because Blaydes looked pretty good in this fight. He was getting hurt badly. Ngannou, when he lands in combination, just rocking Blaydes all over the place. But when Blaydes fires off one of those blast double leg takedowns, he's able to get him, look good doing it. So, humanizing Francis Ngannou, right? We saw Francis face adversity in the regionals. We saw Francis face some adversity in the UFC. We've seen Francis lose fights, right? We've got to take all this into account. But right here, this is a growth moment for Francis. Another tough fight, another opportunity to get better, where he's getting taken down. He's getting shown, oh, these are the things I need to improve on. Francis landing the beautiful counter left, whether it's on the hook, whether it's on the straight. You will notice something about Francis if you start watching his fights. The guy doesn't need to land a right hand, right? He doesn't need to land a left hand. He just needs to land. He has power in both hands, tremendously so. He can land those shovel uppercuts that look like they're at an inhuman angle, and it still lands with authority. He can throw an overhand that lands partially behind somebody's ear, and they still hit the deck. So Francis Ngannou carries a really tremendous amount of power, and that's something that we've got to think about when we're analyzing these matchups, because not everybody's built the same, right? Ciryl Gane, a lot more movement-based, a lot more attritional, a lot more volume-based. Francis Ngannou, power, horsepower, knocking people the F out, moving quickly through time and space, crashing the pocket, blitzing. A lot of different approaches that you can take to this fight game. And so we got to give credence to what people are doing well and where they're making improvements over time. So we see them exchanging in the pocket. This is all good. Blaydes' face is messed up badly. His eye is ruined. He can't see, and it's pretty clear midway through the fight. Ngannou, just a better striker at range. Blaydes, who looked like a better striker at range than Derrick Lewis before getting knocked out by him, he's not a bad striker, right? He's just uncomfortable. He's not as comfortable throwing offense. He's not as comfortable in a firefight as Francis. And so I think that Francis is a lot more comfortable in those positions than somebody like Blaydes. And that's what we see is Francis getting taken down, popping back up to his feet, leaping in with the left hook. Curtis Blaydes has some success, but Francis, when he lands the 1-2, has so much more authority. When he lands the leg kicks, he's doing damage. He's knocking people off their feet. He's compromising their ability to move. So I think that this is something, again, we got to look at how is Francis going to approach this fight? How can we theorize? I can tell you there's certain things Francis does in every fight. He's going to throw low kicks, guys. He does it in every fight. He's going to come out and he's going to fire off that lead left hook and try and use it to set up that overhand right. He does it in every fight. But there's also things that he mixes in that he changes throughout the course of his career. So we're going to look at those as well. But basically, the bottom line is, first time they fought, fight gets stopped because Curtis Blaydes can't see. And he's asked by the referee. The referee basically finds out, oh, yeah, can't see. So we move on. We get Francis Ngannou. Now that he's beaten Curtis Blaydes as an underdog, we get Francis Ngannou in the role of a favorite, -600, against Bojan Milosevic. I believe this is a Serbian gentleman. Guys, Bojan, this is like the fight that really shouldn't have happened. You know, he's a tiny heavyweight, looked supremely overmatched. The odds reflected that as well. Francis looks like another kind of person, it says in my notes. So much more visibly athletic. Francis is a massive heavyweight. Bojan's trying to run. He's trying to skirt the octagon. Francis is patient in this fight, slowly stalking him, not misfiring a lot, picking his shots, stalks him onto the fence, lands some big punches, and knocks him down with hooks in the pocket, chases him down. Bojan was not happy with the stoppage, but he basically just got hit, covered up on the ground, and didn't have much of an answer. So that's, a nothing fight, really, throwaway fight. If you're going to go back and watch the Francis highlights, the Rolodex, really one of the ones you can probably skip. Not a tremendous amount you'll learn about Francis Ngannou by watching that fight. Easy setup fight for him, and he crushed the can in that sense. We move on. We've got Anthony Hamilton, and this is the fight I keep coming back to because we see that growth from Francis Ngannou. We see a huge improvement here, in my opinion, from fight to fight. And Anthony Hamilton comes into this fight. He's 6 years older, right? He was coming off of one knockout win. Otherwise, he was kind of in a rough stretch in his career. So really nothing too exceptional from Anthony Hamilton that would make you think, this is going to be the guy who's going to, set the world on fire. But he was coming off a big knockout win, trying to rebuild his name, very motivated for the fight. Commentary had a lot of nice things to say about him. Brian Stan included, said he trained with the guy, said he's a great grappler, said he's strong, said he's athletic, says he's looking the best of his career. Francis works from the center octagon there. Even though he has half the pro experience, he looks tremendous. Francis checks the kick from Hamilton, backs him up to the fence, hard outside low kicks, and Hamilton is quickly shooting. Francis uses that butterfly elevator sweep. You'll see it consistently. He's not a perfect grappler, but Francis has a basic idea of the things he's normally supposed to be doing to keep himself in a fight, and he'll use that butterfly underhook to not get crushed underneath these heavyweights. He denies the attempted mat return after he rolls back up into the rear waist cinch, and then we see Francis is able to create the angle, gets to knee on belly after setting up the Kimura, right? So imagine somebody standing behind me. Francis reaches over, locks in that Kimura, rips it down to the ground, and then from that top position, he gets to knee on belly, he gets that arm across, and he finishes the Kimura on Anthony Hamilton here. And it was really impressive, right? Physically, it was impressive. Technically, it was impressive. The fact that he went, instead of going to side control like most guys would, he went right to knee on belly, brutal, dominant position, and got that lethal finish from the top. Really impressive showing from Francis there. I would argue one of the more impressive showings he's ever had in the UFC. And another fight where we show Francis Ngannou, not the one-dimensional threat he's made out to be. Yes, he's pretty finish reliant, right? Every win he's ever had in his career has come by finish. But that being said, 25% of those career wins have come by submission. So we got to give, that credence to Francis Ngannou. This guy has multiple ways to finish fights, and he has proven that at the UFC level. Granted, Anthony Hamilton, 15-5 journeyman type character at the time. Still, I thought it was an impressive win, and I thought that he looked very good doing it. So Kimura lock from standing to knee on belly at 157 of that very first round. Francis Ngannou gets the win over Anthony Hamilton. So, we talked about it with Ciryl Gane, right? We see that jump in level for the JDS fight. This is where we see it for Francis Ngannou. He gets the Andre Arlovski step up, right? A lot of heavyweights have gotten this step up. This is where a lot of heavyweights get turned away. Even heavyweights that I think deserve to beat Andre Arlovski, like my man Tanner Boser, don't get the nod sometimes from the judges, even when they do a lot of the right work, because Andre's a savvy vet, because Andre's got those ways of sneaking out a fight, because Andre, he's a pretty clever guy, long in the tooth, but got a lot of skills, a lot of time in the game, a lot of sweat equity. Not going to matter here, guys. Big Francis was hearing not a peep of that. So Francis, 7 years younger in the matchup, 1 inch taller. He's got a 6-inch reach advantage here. Massive, 83 inches versus 77. Arlovski coming off a 3-fight losing streak, all by finish, but he's highly ranked at the time, guys. His KO losses were to Stipe. They were to Overeem. This is the class of the weight at the time in 2017. So we see Francis touches gloves. He's moving his head. He's feinting. He fires an overhand right, lands partially. Then we see Arlovski. He's moving. He's using leg kicks. He's trying to set up the low line side kicks, Jackson Wink staple. Then we see Francis leap in with the left. He's feinting the blitz, but can't follow up behind it. So now he's trying to mix up your anticipation. You think every time I start this blitz, I'm going to come all the way in. Nope. Halfway. Oh, am I coming in? Oh. And he's starting to build these half reactions and feinting much better over the course of his career. Once again, is Francis Ngannou. So now we see Francis conceding ground, but he's also countering as we see Arlovski come forward. So right hand scores for Arlovski, near miss for Francis. Lead left hook and a right hand behind it snaps Arlovski's head back. And just like I mentioned before, guys, that familiar turtle position drops down to both hands and knees, covering up the head. Done. All over. One left hook, right straight. That's it. Andre Arlovski, world champion, says no mas. Goes down to that covered up position and did not want any more of Big Francis, understandably so. But again, this is Francis Ngannou, minus 375. He was as a favorite here. A lot of confidence in Francis Ngannou taking on these big challenges, including the step up in competition. Guys, this is where the public narrative changes, right? Because the Arlovski win, you could write it off as, hey, this guy, he's He's only coming off those knockout losses. It's Arlovsky. People thought his chin was gone 10 years ago. Maybe this is just not the win we think it is. Let's get him in there with the ream and really find out what this kid's all about. So we send Francis Ngannou in with the ream. Alistair's coming off a KO win over Mark Hunt, a majority decision over Fabrice Verdum, all in this same year, 2017. Excuse me. So Alistair basically is in good form at this point, right? In good regard within the division, in good standing, coming off of a relevant finish victory. But you got big fucking Francis on the other side here. He's 6 years younger, right? The height is at parity. There's a 3-inch reach advantage once again for big Francis. And Francis is 15 pounds heavier than Alistair Overeem, which, comes into play when we talk about the power. Power is in part a function of how much mass I can deliver, how much weight is behind my body. Francis is a big man with great weight transfer. He can send all of the weight of his body very quickly and in a very precise location through you. That's a problem, right? Because a big guy like that with all that power, who can turn over the hips, who's got some technique, problem, guys. So we're going to move right along here and look at Francis Ngannou against Alistair Overeem. You guys have probably all seen this knockout. Alistair's blitzing out with the left hook. He's trying to level change. He's trying to take down Francis Ngannou. This is a guy who is a K1 kickboxer, comes out. He wants nothing to do with big Francis in that striking department. Francis presses him into the fence. Francis is leaning in, now using his hips to control the exchanges. Francis secures like almost a minute of control before Big Dan Surfer Man comes in and starts getting some separation here. Alistair is trying to fade away, throw hooks as he retreats. Francis confusing him with the rapid head movement, the bouncing footwork. He uses that natural fear people have of him to get panicked reactions. People talk about sometimes Jose Aldo, a fantastic, phenomenal fighter, one of my favorites, but he's sort of tense on defense, right? He's like constantly ready to defend, to tense up, to move, to react to things. And I think that much in the same way, Francis, because he's so scary, because he hits so hard, it only takes a little half of a movement, a little head fake, and the guy is tensing up, moving backwards, stiffening their neck. And you can only do that so many times before you start to exhaust yourself. So I think Francis, doesn't always use work rate to exhaust people. Sometimes what Francis is doing is he's using fear and mental presence and pressure by offensive footwork to create that kind of fear and anxiety in his opponents. I think he did it very successfully against Alistair Overeem. So pawing with the lead hand, he's drawing out counter opportunities. Then he delivers a shovel uppercut. Guys, if you've never seen this, if you've never heard of Pez dispensers, look one up. This is what Alistair Overeem got for Christmas this year, a Pez dispenser. I say for Christmas, it literally was right at Christmas time here. You'll see in December of 2017, just got absolutely brutal, guys. The ground and pound shots that follow up. So he hits him with a big right shovel uppercut, drops him badly, and then follows up with this ground and pound shot. Watch the replay, guys. Overeem gets hit to the ground, and literally his feet bounce up. He does a calf raise. It's insane, man. I think that that kind of power is really, it's kind of undescribable. So I think that this is a fight where we see the potential of Francis maximized, and we also see that public perception start to turn, right? I tweeted this out earlier. It got a lot of love, and Jon Anik himself actually ended up responding to it, which was very nice of him. One of my absolute heroes in this fight game, one of the smartest guys in the room. Anytime they're talking about fights, Jon Anik says, "Down goes the ream. Francis Ngannou has arrived, paging Stipe Miocic. Francis Ngannou is coming." Beautiful call, really precise language. Jon Anik just doesn't freaking miss. He is one of the best in the freaking planet at play-by-play, and I thought he hit the nail on the head there. That was when Francis Ngannou arrived, and guys, we then see Stipe Miocic is the next up for Francis Ngannou. This is when the Francis Ngannou hype train gets derailed, right? Here's what I mean. Francis comes into the fight as the betting favorite, right? Kind of like Ciryl Gane this weekend, ironically enough, right? We see Francis, 4 years younger, 31 versus 35. Guys, Ciryl Gane, 31, Francis Ngannou, 35. A lot of parallels between these matchups. I think that's funny and interesting. So I wanted to point it out. But what else do we got? Height parity and a 3-inch reach advantage once again for Francis Ngannou. That reach advantage remains a constant feature, not a bug, of his performances. So now we see Stipe opening up with the low leg kick. Round 1 of this fight, guys, is absolutely bonkers. Goes back and forth. Both guys landing great shots. Both guys exchanging. And it's a fun fight. You see that Francis Ngannou doesn't have slouch takedown defense there either. Stipe gets the single leg early. Francis right back to his feet, using the chin to break up the head position. We see that Francis used a lot of energy, but pulled himself out of the clinches on more than one occasion. So we saw that Francis was able to use that power, move around somebody like Stipe Miocic, who is, at the time, here again, we're talking about context, at the time, widely considered the greatest heavyweight of all time, or right on the precipice, right? This is like the fight to define Stipe's legacy. And of course, that always changes, right? We MMA fans are never satisfied with somebody's legacy. So the second Stipe loses, he's back to being a bum who could never beat anybody, and he never was that good anyways. But I think that what we see from this fight is that Stipe Miocic was wise. He was experienced. My man Gerhardt, who is supposed to join the show today, want to shout out Gerhardt from Your Best Bet Sports Data. If you guys have never checked it out, go check them out on Twitter. Really smart guys. They gave me that Cavs first quarter against the spread trend that I've been cashing in on myself a little bit. So like I said, go check them out if you never have. Go check out my man Gerhardt. Very smart guy. A lot of good combat sports opinions. And we're going to have him on the show again in the very near future. So wanted to get back to this action though, guys. We've got the first round. I scored it for Stipe Miocic, right? Because Stipe was landing good shots. He was getting into the top position, and he was able to sting Francis on more than one occasion. And this is the problem for me, is periodically Francis was dropping his hands to hips. So was Stipe, right? This fight had such a high pace for a heavyweight fight. In the first round, we see a really, really, tired set of exchanges. But Stipe is the one who's able to last, to weather the storm, who's been in these 5-round fights, who's been in a long slog, who's been in a 4-round war with Mark Hunt, who's been in these extended, drawn-out fights where he has to land a ton of shots, where he has to accumulate a lot of top time. And I think that that's something we've got to be weary of, is that Francis has been through these trials and tribulations. He's made some improvements, some changes to his game, and he's kind of changed some of his own outcomes here. So we look back, 10-9 for Miocic in round 1. Francis, hands on his hips to start off the fight, impressive that he goes 5 rounds looking so tired. You got to remember that. Imagine you're dead tired. You have nothing left. You're very tired. And now I tell you, you've got to fight for 20 minutes, the world champion. Exhausting, completely daunting. And this guy holds up like a freaking pro under pressure. And this is at a time when you're the favorite going into a world title fight. This is the time when you're the company's cash cow. This is the time when everybody wants to see you succeed. This is the time, except the people in the arena. So here's the other thing. Go into hostile territory, Francis. Take the belt from this guy while everybody's cheering, USA, USA. And they're not rooting for you to do well. And they're cheering every time you get picked up and slammed. That is like definitional hostile territory. Francis goes there to try and take the belt from the greatest heavyweight of all time in his first title opportunity. Man, that's a lot to handle, especially for this guy who's really finding his own way in the world, who's really, pretty young in his own combat sports career, who's just getting his, himself wet behind the ears in the space. We look, once again, guys, I'm going to bring you to the top. We've got Francis Ngannou, 11-1, 12 pro fights against Stipe Miocic, 17-2. And think about how many of those fights for Miocic were in the UFC. So Miocic has got tons of UFC experience, tons of experience against relevant guys at the highest level, kickboxers, guys with power, wrestlers, all across the gambit. Stipe fought them all. So Stipe's got a bounty of experience to fall back on. Whereas this guy, Francis, he can't even accumulate cage time because every time he steps in there, he knocks some dude's head off. So I think that, that's something, again, that people might not be considering is we've got to give this guy a developmental curve because he's not getting a lot of time in the octagon. He can't really train at full capacity ever, or he's probably knocking guys dead, right? So it's like you've got to be really thoughtful about how you develop a talent like Francis Ngannou because he's dangerous. Like you can't really let people get into scenarios where they can get hurt by this guy all that often. I think that Francis, if he was doing live hard sparring rounds on a consistent basis, he would probably end people's careers and stuff, prematurely. The guy has a really insane amount of power. So I think that Francis probably tempers his sparring considerably to not hurt people. But on that fight night, Francis comes out swinging, right? And then it's about trying to find what's the balance of me using this full power that I could achieve without spending all of my energy prematurely. And so this was a learning curve fight. And I think that Francis, made a good account of himself, despite the fact that he was completely gassed, right? This is what Stipe basically does the rest of the fight. He takes him down and he hangs on him in a power half, a 3/4 Nelson. If you guys have seen the fight, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you haven't seen the fight, basically I like to think of it like he's going like this, pressing Francis's head down over and over again against the fence. And then he'll throw a couple pitter-patter shots. He'll throw a knee to the body. But really, Stipe just wanted him to hold all of his weight and keep him down against the fence. It wasn't a performance from Stipe that made you think, this guy could really just beat up Francis Ngannou and hurt him really bad. It's kind of shocking how little damage Francis has on his face at the end of this fight. But Stipe was able to win positions. He was able to win the sport, right? And he was able to outlast him, right? A fight, you got to be able to go till the end. So if you can't go till the end of the fight or you can't finish the fight, hey, then you can't fight, right? Like you got to give the credit where it's due. Stipe Miocic is the better fighter that night. But I think even that night, there were signs that Francis Ngannou could beat this guy, right? Which is that, number one, when he was completely death-gassed, we see Francis Ngannou still landing shots that Pez dispenser pop back the head of Stipe Miocic, right? I see here in my notes, level change from Stipe. Francis stuffs the head down, denies the takedown, but now Stipe's pinning him to the fence, right? Stipe just fought a really smart fight. He fought a fight that was within the margins. He controlled the body lock. He used a labored Francis Ngannou's unbalanced stance against him by tripping him up with little short, footwork in the clinch against the fence. Francis being forced to cover up from the ground and pound. But again, it's pitter-patter stuff from Stipe. The ref is constantly warning him, you got to do more. You got to work from here. You got to take more risks, and so I think that what we see is this fourth round, Stipe's low kicking, Francis trying to look for hooks, trying to find some kind of offense, but Francis able to wrestle the turtle position, stuck again in that 3/4 Nelson, stuck again against the fence. And Stipe is now pressuring him with the striking. Francis is really just getting touched with the shots and not reacting very well. So I thought that this was a clean 10-8 round for Miocic. Just really no answer from Francis offensively. And so I don't know how to give him, more than 8 points for that round. He didn't get nearly finished over and over again. Otherwise, I'd elect a 10-7. But 10-8, I think, is appropriate when he doesn't really get off any kind of successful offense in his own right, and he's really in a reactive position, absorbing some damage and being utterly controlled. And so then the fifth round, guys, Miocic with the low kicks, dynamism is gone from the stance of Ngannou, a lot less bouncy, a lot less movement, easily being pushed back to the fence, constantly on the back foot now. Stipe is warned by Dean in the clinch, Francis looking for that guillotine attempt, nothing doing. Stipe pulls his head out. Then the first separation of the fight came after another warning. Stipe is kicking low. He's jabbing. He's really just trying to wait out the clock here. Francis tries to walk him down, doesn't have the energy to do it. Ngannou attempts an ugly flying knee, nothing close. Stipe underhook, pins him to the fence, and the crowd is cheering him out. Every referee agreed with my score, 50-44 here. So that's what we end up with. The judges pick that, man, not one round for Francis Ngannou. So we got to just acknowledge up front, that was a rout. It was, one of the most impressive wins of the year. Stipe Miocic, one of the most impressive wins of his career, solved Ngannou, won the fight, laid out a blueprint for how other guys could maybe approach the challenge of a guy like Ngannou. But, overall, the writing, like I said, was on the wall that there may be a rematch in the future from this fight. But what happens is we see, it's not the bounce back that we wanted to see from Francis, right? So this is the fight that gets talked about as one of the worst fights in UFC history. I don't think without good reason. This is a terrible fight. And I think that especially if you open up the category to let's say, what's a fight that the expectations were so much higher than the reality, right? Because there's a lot of bad fights that have happened, right? A lot of sloppy fights, a lot of crap, a lot of fights where not all that much engagement happens. But, it's a little bit further, few and far between. This is a fight where we expected so much, so we were even more let down. Like, this would have just been a bad fight if we never heard of either of these guys, because nothing really lands at all. But you'd at least have the threat, that like both guys, moving in, they're both big, anything can happen at any time. I guess watching live, there's a little bit more enjoyment, but commentary is burying this fight live. Like, everybody knew that this was an effing stinker during the fight. It looked like crap. It was crap. There really wasn't engagements here. So before we get into it, from this fight's perspective, just want to shout out the people still rocking with us in the chat. It's 1:35 local time, and we got my man Will says the GOAT. Appreciate you, Will. You're the man for rocking with us this hour of the evening. My man Ty says, Liam, you say Francis's face didn't have a mark on it. Did you see his face in the pros fight press conference? His face is ballooned. To be honest with you, Ty, no, I did not. In the octagon, he looked like he had minor swelling, but nothing too serious. I'd look further into that for sure. I would say, after any fight, most of these guys are going to have puffy faces, things like that. But I do think that's also the nature of a heavyweight contest. There wasn't really a ton of cuts, ton of bruising. Again, Francis probably wears it a little bit better than a lot of guys do. One of the things about being Caucasian and fighting as well, it's just that blood is super visible. Cuts are super visible. And I think that's something that we got to at least consider there as well. Potentially couldn't see some of the damage on Francis as well. But yeah, he definitely took some damage. He ate some clean right hands on the feet down the stretch when he was tired. He was getting, cleanly boxed up by Stipe at points as well. So just want to acknowledge that. The Dab Father says, loving the vibe, Liam, MMA talk at 1 a.m. I'm a late night cat, not afraid to get into these fights at any hour of the day or night. And so we got, 20 people rocking live with us at 1:36 in the morning. Can't hate on that. Appreciate each and every one of you guys. And I'm a night owl too. So it seems like all you guys are as well if you're tuning in for this. Second worst fight in UFC history, says my man Bout Better. That's fair, man. What's the worst, Bout? Tell me that. Liam is legit. Man puts in work more than some professionals. Hey, Will, too kind of you, my brother. Let's put in work right now. We're going to talk about this man, Francis Ngannou, and the stinker of a fight he had with Derrick Lewis. Even pre-fight, I think you could see a little bit of hesitation in Francis Ngannou. He's got a 4-inch reach advantage, but he's 10 pounds lighter than a guy like Derrick Lewis. He's 2 years younger. Derrick has a lot more experience, guys, more than twice the experience of Ngannou. Plus, we see that Derrick Lewis, he's got a ton of UFC level experience as well at the time that this took place. So I think there's a lot to be said for Derrick Lewis being an underappreciated guy. I slept on Derrick Lewis last time out. I thought my man Chris Dawkins was going to clean him up. No dice. My man Derrick Lewis, the knockout king, comes through once again with a big, devastating finish. So Derrick Lewis remains dangerous to this day, but this was really a shit fight, guys. And if you go back and watch it, nothing happens. Ngannou isn't creating opportunities. There isn't as much faking and feinting. And when there is, there's no, there's nothing convincing behind it. You want a fake to work, you got to throw something, right? I need my throwing and my faking and my feinting to play off one another. Am I really going? Am I really going? Am I really going? That's what I need to do. I need to set expectation. And we didn't see that from Francis. Everything looked half-assed. Everything looked like a half attempt. Everything looked like a feint. There wasn't really committed offense. And after the fact, Francis talked about it. He said, listen, I let the fear of my last fight carry into this fight. I didn't let my hands go. I didn't attempt offense. And I think it has to do with two factors. I think number one, he did not want to get tired. And number two, Derrick Lewis can match him in that power component. So if Francis got too reckless, chin up in the air, rushing the pocket with the hooks, it's anybody's fight. It's anybody's fight at that point. So I think Francis was wise to that, and he was nervous, and I think he underperformed significantly. So if they were to rematch, I think that, that's a fight where I would favor Francis Ngannou. But that being said, guys, look at this, because this is what we got to keep in mind. At the time, Francis Ngannou is minus 340. Derrick Lewis is plus 260. This is coming off Francis being a favorite in a title fight against Stipe Miocic and losing there. So Francis 2 times failed to come through as a favorite in those matchups. Those are also the only 2 losses in Francis Ngannou's UFC career. So UFC run 11-2 for Francis Ngannou. Those are the 2 losses. He took them back-to-back. It was Stipe Miocic, 5-round unanimous decision, and it was a unanimous decision as well to Derrick Lewis, the Black Beast. So really, there's not like an inexplicable loss on the Francis Ngannou record. There's a very weird fight, and then there's also a fight where he loses to the champion when he's 4 years younger and has half the pro fights. That makes a lot of sense. There's nothing crazy or outlandish about that. The other thing I want to point out, right, is like not all divisions are created equal. And what I mean by that is if you look at the flyweights, right, like we see in the co-main event, the flyweights have boundless cardio. They can go, all night long. They can scramble for position. They can do all this crazy stuff. Heavyweight is just so much different. The finishing potential at flyweight is a lot lower. And when guys finish, they're going to finish subs more often than they're going to finish knockouts, you would think, because the knockouts, the power, the weight, the mass isn't there at flyweight. It's a lot more limited. The age is also a critical factor, right? We see that younger people tend to dominate the small weight classes, right? The older weight classes, heavyweights stick around, man. Heavyweights stick around. Francis Ngannou, 35-year-old champion right now. Stipe Miocic, the guy he took it from, was 37 or something by the time he lost the title. Maybe 36 if I'm speaking out of turn. Freaking Daniel Cormier is like, 38, 39 when he's the champion? So it's like this is an older division for champions. This is a division where a lot of times we see, it's not the youngest, freshest guy on the block. It can be, but heavyweight is a older division on average than any other UFC division by far. And even still, we see one weight class below, 205 pounds, Glover Teixeira, 42 years old, running the damn circus. So I think that, sometimes we overestimate the effective age in fighting, and especially in these heavier weight classes, guys. Somebody's speed, timing, reactions, it's going to be so apparent, the drop-off at 125 pounds, 135 pounds. We just saw an example, Rafael Santos, great fighter, can't fight anymore, really, with these young guys, because Ricky Simone, who's not known as a big power puncher, just took him the F out because he was able to walk him down, hit him with shots that Rafa wasn't able to get out of the way of, wasn't able to create anything, wasn't able to move fast enough, and ends up eating really big shots as a result. This is a lot different. Right now we've got 2 big guys, 2 guys where the consequences are really dire. And that plays a big factor in how much they're going to engage and also how much the age has to do with the outcome. I think that if Francis Ngannou was 37, 38, 39, I'd be a lot more concerned about the age, because that's when you start to see those knockouts start to really skyrocket up in terms of likelihood. But right now, we're not really at that stage yet for Francis. We're right in that sweet spot, almost at that heavyweight division where I'd say, roughly 31 to 35, good prime for heavyweight, maybe even a little beyond that. A lot of guys have been able to extend it. So I think, sky's still the limit for both these guys. Win, lose, or draw, Francis Ngannou, Ciryl Gane both have time in this division. But, it's Francis who's in that elder statesman role, kind of like Stipe was. Whereas, Ciryl Gane is the next Francis. He's the new kid on the block. He's the updated game. He's the dangerous guy. He's the guy everybody loves. And so we're going to see, if Gane is able to make that leap on the first attempt, unlike Francis, or, does he face the same thing? Does he see, I go up against this champion who's 4 years older, who doesn't look like the fresh new shiny toy, but he fights the right game. He finds a way to win, and he holds on to that title belt just a little longer, makes me earn my way back up the division. It's very possible, right? And we haven't seen Gane humbled, and we haven't seen Gane knock down that peg. We've seen Gane, put together a pretty impressive resume now across Thai boxing. We look, he's 10-0 in professional mixed martial arts, but guys, 10-0 is about half the professional fights of a Francis Ngannou. So that's the other thing we got to keep in mind is now Francis is the guy who's got the bounty of experience to lean on, including championship fights at the UFC level. Now let's get back to it. We've got Francis Ngannou and Curtis Blaydes too. Much more decisive result here, guys. So I believe this was the main event over in China, and we see plus 190 both times that they fought, guys. Curtis Blaydes gets the distinction as the betting favorite over Francis Ngannou, and to the tune of plus 190 here. Francis is 5 years older in this matchup, 32 versus 27. It's a stylistic nightmare, you would think. A guy who can wrestle really well, a guy who's got controlled position on top, a guy who's got decent enough striking. I think the reason that Curtis Blaydes is considered chinny today is because Francis Ngannou has touched up that chin badly. And he did it the first time, and, they rematched. They fought in 2016. They fight again in 2018, and Francis is again able to get to work. So Francis looks confident now, coming back off of that, tough performance against Derrick Lewis. He looks like he's back to his old self. Plus, now he's got a fight that he literally knows he can win. He's beaten this guy before. So we know that going in. Francis's confidence back through the roof. First committed right hand from Francis, drops Blaydes badly, goes over the top of the jab, counters it. Francis sends him spinning. He takes a dominant angle in turtle. And again, I mentioned it would be thematic. Guys, that turtle position, guys get hit. They go down to the turtle. They are just covered up waiting for the ref to stop it because they don't want any more of that, Francis hammering. And Francis really puts a hammering to people fast. When he drops you, he does not tend to let people off the hook. He tends to do a lot of damage standing behind them in the top position while they're turtled and throwing big hooks wide to both sides. And he can create a ton of torque, a ton of leverage. I've seen him flatten guys out with those shots and also just knock people off balance. They're on all fours. Francis stands above them, hit them with a big clubbing shot. It knocks them off balance. So Francis can create a lot of power from that position. Now we look, what's the final result here? Francis Ngannou defeats Curtis Blaydes via KO1, overhand right, left hands from turtle. Curtis is complaining about the stoppage, but I think that, the referee really saved him from himself there. That was going to be an ugly, ugly beatdown, the looks of how things were going. And I think Francis was just going to put him out cold, to be honest with you. So that was, the comeback fight. That's the bounce back. That's where Francis starts to get on track. But guys, once again, we see betting underdog, Francis Ngannou, plus 160 now is the comeback on Francis Ngannou, taking on Cain Velasquez here. Cain Velasquez returning from a 2.5-year layoff. Granted, he was coming off a win. He had knocked out Travis Brown, but This is, again, important to consider. We've got Cain Velasquez here. He is at a 2.5-inch height disadvantage. He's at a 6-inch reach disadvantage. Francis is heavier. He's 4 years younger. So basically checking every box for Francis Ngannou right now, as far as I'm concerned, right? Pre-fight, a lot of things you'd want to see from Francis. Now, we're in the large octagon, right? Want to draw attention to that. It's something that a lot of people have brought up as a narrative pre-fight in this encounter. Francis lands a short counter right uppercut with his back basically pressed to the fence. So this is not advantageous position. This is not where Francis wants to be. This is not how he would draw up this fight, right? He gets backed up onto the fence. And what's so remarkable about a guy like Francis Ngannou is that one counter uppercut knocks Cain Velasquez out, ruins his surgically repaired knee. He falls awkwardly back over his own leg. Precise ground and pound from Francis. As soon as he drops people, he hits them with big thudding shots that tend to turn their lights off, really hurt them, get them to turn down, turn away, cover up, and get finishes. Cain tries to wrestle up a single leg on Herzog, right? After Francis is long gone, Francis look back on his face, walking around like, hey, I'm the shit. And I think that that's, an impressive freaking showing from this guy. My man Bout Better says he's got to hit the hay. Brother, appreciate you being here. All the rest of the information will be for you in the morning. I'll try and timestamp it out as well. So appreciate you, my brother. Thank you for stopping by, and appreciate everybody else who's still rocking with us. Almost done here with the Francis Ngannou portion of our tape study. But bottom line is, Francis sends Cain to the shadow realm. Right uppercut, ground and pound strikes. Again, we're seeing left hands, right hands, uppercuts, hooks, straights. Anything that this guy Francis Ngannou is throwing at people, it's fucking him up. So dangerous guy, power in all hands, power in a lot of different weapons, can throw it with a variety of setups as well. Now, I think that next up, we've got freaking Francis Ngannou, Junior Dos Santos. So Francis, 3 years younger, height parity, 6-inch reach advantage, massive reach advantage. And this is a common opponent between the two of them. They touch gloves. Francis, no surprise to anybody, right? If you take away one thing, Francis Ngannou starts off most of his fights with a big outside low kick, right? He likes to come out and throw hard leg kicks to the outside and really get that weapon working for him early. If the guy sees the low kick and tries to intercept, that's when Francis starts throwing the big swinging hooks, normally off that lead hand. He'll try and fire that big rear overhand. So again, Francis, classic offense. JDS is retreating, trying to fake, trying to feint, looking for low kicks of his own, but absorbing a bunch from Francis in the early going. Francis is feinting with the lead left hook. It's one of his best punches. He's trying to check Junior's aggression, keep him at bay. He lands his own leg kick. Now does JDS. And Francis, one of the things we should comment on, he stands very wide. He likes to keep that wide base in his stance. He's moving his upper body and his torso a lot, but he's keeping that, pretty set foot position. That, I think, has pros and cons, for Francis. But I think one of the pros that we see for Francis is that, he's able to set down on really hard punches, even when he's retreating. The problem is it leaves him susceptible to some of these low kick offerings from people. So he got, his leg kind of blasted at here and almost got knocked off balance because his stance was so wide. So another low kick returned by Francis, leaps in with the left hook, another right hand, and they're just exchanging these brutal low kicks, right? We see a left hook, right overhand counter by Francis. He throws it twice in a row. And the second time he throws it, the right sounds like a gunshot, guys. Once again, familiar territory. JDS into that turtle position. This is where a lot of guys end up when they're fighting Francis Ngannou. They start off strong. They start off on their feet. They start off feeling good. They end in that turtle position down here, head covered by hands. Get me out of here. Universal sign to the ref. I'm looking for a way out, right? So again, we see the power of Francis Ngannou make the difference, get the victory here. Another common opponent for these guys, Francis Ngannou, taking on Jairzinho Rozenstruik. He comes in as a minus 255 betting favorite. He's 1 year older. He's at height parity. He's got a 5-inch reach advantage here. They're the same weight. So Jairzinho, like I mentioned, kind of the analog best that we could do on short notice, type of deal for Francis, right? When we look at Ciryl Gane's resume, who looks the most like Francis in terms of their style? It's probably Jairzinho Rozenstruik. He's definitely, one of the archetypes for him. I think that this, fight kind of shows the difference between Francis and somebody like Jairzinho, right? Which is Jairzinho is comfortable getting walked backwards and being forced to lash out and respond from time to time with his back against the fence, right? That's not really what you see from Francis. That's never how he draw up a fight, is for him to be backing up and then throwing. So Francis takes the initiative there, takes the lead foot, backs up Jairzinho. And guys, if you've never seen it, I'd be surprised, but most of us will recall the home, bink, and it is that final fourth left hand after a series of missed blows that lands and just sends Jairzinho. It literally knocks him out instantly. So he is out, knocked out, sitting against the fence. And then Francis, again, shows off the precision on this ground and pound, guys. Bop, 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 bop. Doesn't miss. Lands hard leather. And Jairzinho is out bad. So Francis, my man Francis, did him wrong in that fight. What do I have in my notes here? Ngannou blitzes forward, 4-punch series, fourth left hook, boom, puts Jairzinho in the box. 1 minute lands, he goes to sleep. It's the ground and pound that sends him all over the place. Could permanently damage the chin of Rozenstruik. And now Big Dan is literally holding up Rozenstruik by his head against the fence so he's not falling all over the place. Francis comes back to check on him. Nice guy, Francis. But again, another brutal knockout. Instead of the right hand, these are the left hook from Francis Ngannou. Devastating results when he lands these shots. So, freaking super impressive as far as I'm concerned, win for Francis Ngannou. And again, Jairzinho goes 25 minutes with Ciryl Gane. Did he look like he was any more acquainted to being in the octagon with Cyril? No, right? Both these guys disposed of Jairzinho in their own way. But you've got to remember, the guy who disposed of him in 20 seconds and left him lifeless, that guy is the betting underdog. And we got to just keep that in the back of our heads here, is that, yes, the prettier game is definitely Ciryl Gane. Of that, there could be no question. But the effect of the game is that Francis Ngannou touches people and they don't fucking move. Thank you, Jeremy Stevens. Great quote that will live in infamy, right? But I think that this is a guy that we've got to give that special kind of respect to, because he fights guys that don't get knocked out like Jairzinho, right? Let's check back. Jairzinho plus 205 in this fight. Guys, he's undefeated. Guys, he's never lost, right? So he had only lost in kickboxing, 10-0 as a mixed martial artist on his own little run in the organization. The UFC's like, who's going to be our big, scary power guy? Francis says, yeah, leave no doubt. I sent him into the next dimension. It took me 20 seconds. What's next? That's impressive, right? And I think that was a statement win for Francis Ngannou as well. Knocks out the kickboxer in dominant fashion and very quickly. So now, guys, it brings us to the modern day, right? It brings us to the most recent, the most relevant in a lot of ways, Francis Ngannou footage that there is. So Francis Ngannou took on Stipe Miocic. He comes up short. He gets the rematch. It takes place March 27th of 2021. And so again, I talk about what have you done for me lately? We see Ciryl Gane has been active. He's been in the trenches. He's had that recent title fight at UFC 265 with Derrick Lewis. This is the last time we saw Francis Ngannou in the octagon. But the results, if I don't mind saying so, were extremely impressive, right? So what do we see? Francis Ngannou, 4 years younger, right? 38 versus 34. So now we see Miocic, who really has sort of aged out of that prime. He's 3 years deeper into this shit. He went from 35 to 38. right? So a lot different context for that matchup. Francis, meanwhile, he's now 34 years old. He's now 15-3 as a pro martial artist. So he's closing the gap on Stipe in terms of that competition. He's gotten in the octagon, gotten his confidence back, dispatched a bunch of guys quickly. But he also changed his training environment. So now he has something new to tell himself, hey, I am better. I am making improvements. I am a different fighter. I could beat this guy. And what does he do? He comes out, looks like a much different, much better fighter. Let's break down the tape on the most recent Francis Ngannou fight. So touch of gloves, we're underway. Francis is in the center. Stipe's bouncing. Francis with the low kicks early. You got to know to expect that. That's what Francis does. Keep in mind, Francis 30 pounds heavier than Stipe Miocic. But that's not too different, from what it was the first fight. So again, we know that Stipe was a smaller guy, and he was relying on being more agile, being more quick, being more skilled, being more technical. We knew that going in, and this time it wasn't able to work, right? So what did we see? We see Francis is level changing. He's feinting. He's working behind a jab in educated fashion. His footwork looks better. He's not following as much. He's cutting off the angles better. We see hard, precise body shots, basic 1-2s, but he's setting his feet. He's firing the low kick. He's throwing in combination, but he's not throwing constantly. And so he's setting a pace that seems somewhat sustainable for Francis, right? Granted, Francis really doesn't try and pace his fights out over 25 minutes, right? He's trying to find a finish. He's not trying to set up a slow, methodical take you out over time. He's trying to put opportunities together to land his strikes because he knows that when he lands them, the night is capable of ending quickly, right? So he doesn't mind if it takes 1 or 2 or 5 or 10 because he knows that every 25 or so strikes that he lands, somebody is hitting the deck. So that's a guy that's very hard to deal with, a guy who's very hard to game plan for, right? So what do we see here? We see Francis is committing on big things, but he's picking his spots. He's not picking every opportunity to go. He's looking for opportunities, and then he's seizing them when they present themselves. Francis is working at the end of punching range, right? This is the small octagon. Again, important to note, where is this fight taking place? Stipe is forcing him to work towards the fence. Francis angling away, leg outside on the single. So now we see Francis get elevated on that single leg, right? Stipe is starting to lift it. Francis turning his leg outside, trying to push away, create separation from Stipe. Critical if he's going to win the fight, especially the wrestling exchanges. But here is where everything changes, guys. Francis uses the chest lock. He shoves Stipe's head under his chest, right? So now Stipe's head's under here, and he's wrapping around the outside, lifting over Stipe. Stipe's now stuck under the big man. He's smaller. So Francis basically doesn't just try to underhook him, doesn't just try to sprawl him out. He gets to a chest lock, he shoves the head down, and he spins behind it. That's exactly what you want to do. That's fundamental, simple wrestling. And it's good grappling. It's positionally sound. It's fundamentally sound. It makes a ton of sense. He is then in the rear waist cinch, right? Stipe is a wrestler. Stipe's got some skills in these positions, but it's Francis who's able to mat return Stipe and land some hellacious ground and pound, right? Ego trip for Francis, though. That's what I put in my notes. He tried another takedown against the fence, and that's just a waste of energy, right? I think it was good to not only stop the takedown, but to punish the attempt by spinning behind, landing some ground and pound, showing Stipe I can compete in the wrestling. But just because you can compete in the wrestling doesn't mean that when you're the biggest hitter in the division, you want to be, throwing out more takedown attempts than you need to. Takedown attempts for Francis Ngannou should be few and far between. But what we also see in the tape that I think is pretty impressive is that Francis establishes, 1+ minute of top control per takedown attempt. So when Big Francis gets on top of people, he normally makes it count, right? He lasts it. He'll sustain that position for more than a minute at a time. Conversely, right, we see Ciryl Gane, on average, only spends about 23 seconds on top for takedowns that he achieves. So Ciryl Gane able to mix in those threats, right? Able to introduce the threat of level changes, the threat of takedowns. He's fired off a lot of takedown attempts so far in the UFC, but he doesn't get them all that often. And when he does, not able to sustain that top position with the same efficacy that somebody like Francis is. So again, that's something that we got to consider going into the matchup. But then we see, a massive head kick from Francis as he switches southpaw, lands flush. Sorry about that. Think we had brief technical difficulties, but we should be back up and running. So, folks, to close us out, what I was saying is that Francis, he's using two stances now. He's switching. He's slowing down the pace. Even though his mouth is open, even though there's those kind of concerning visuals, we're seeing Francis fight a much more smart, composed game plan, and we're seeing him put together a winning round against Stipe. He got routed, guys. He got cleanly beat by Stipe. Didn't win any rounds against him. He wins the first round, and that was critical. That was essential. It changed Stipe's level of confidence for the second round. Stipe didn't know what he could do. He didn't know if he should wrestle. He didn't know if he should try and strike. He was running out of ideas. Then we see Francis, right? 10-9 win, clear round for him, landed the better shots, got the only takedown, hurt Stipe Miocic. So Stipe has damage to his face, his eye. Francis, he's feinting. He's working from the center. He's smashing him with the low kick. He's picking him apart. Lead hook from Francis with the left. I told you that's a punch you got to watch out for. It's a beautiful shot for Francis, and he uses it to set up that sweeping right hand. He uses it to set up the right straight. He uses it to set up the shovel right uppercut. So you got to know that lead hook for Francis is going to be a critical weapon, and he pairs it beautifully with his jab, right? So he mixes between ba, ba, boom, coming around the guard. Right? Coming around and setting up all sorts of different angles on that right hand. So I think Francis got a lot to offer there, and he was really confusing Stipe, making him work from those positions. Then we see Ngannou finds the lead left. He finds the big right behind it. Now he knocks down Stipe with another lead left, two straights. The left jab knocks Miocic down against the fence. Miocic pops back up. He's a gangster. I love Stipe. Cleveland tough, baby. He stands back up, but Francis meets him, hits him with the hips, short left hooks against the fence. Then Stipe, he's absorbing the rear right uppercut, jacks his head up, right? He's starting to stand tall against the fence line. Francis overswings on the left, misses bad, and Stipe lands a nice counter right hand of his own. Off balance a little bit, but he lands it with good effect. Francis appears to stumble backwards. He sets his feet and explodes that lead left hook, detonates on the chin of Miocic. Brutal. Guys, again, this is not the first time that we have seen Francis hit somebody and they fall backwards over that leg in devastating fashion. Like, it happened to Cain Velasquez. Again, another example. It happens to Stipe Miocic. Ugly knockout. UFC has released this from multiple angles. Terrifying, ugly knockout. Similar kind of scenes to the Alistair Overeem. Brutal knockout. It's the ground and pound. Francis is so efficient, guys. He moves incredibly quickly. And when he hurts you, he hits you with ground and pound shots that are leveling, that are brutal, vicious shots. So I think that, maybe the most underrated portion of Francis Ngannou's game is his ground and pound. If this guy gets you down, he makes you pay, he hurts you really bad, and he normally, honestly, just pounds you into the ground and never gives you a chance to get back up and recover. So I think that, I hope this exercise, right? We went through Ciryl Gane top to bottom, every aspect. We went through Francis Ngannou now, top to bottom, all these different aspects. This is what goes into a fight at this magnitude. This is what goes into a fight at the championship level. This is what goes into a fight between two elite competitors at the top of their game who are in one of the better title fights that the UFC can put together, period, regardless of weight class. A lot of questions to be answered on Saturday night. So I told you guys, right? I got all these notes. You've seen them on my computer. Going to stop sharing my screen now for a little bit. If you want access to those notes, like I said, get at me on Twitter. Go ahead and send me some proof that you're subscribed to the show. leave a like on this video, and then I'd be happy to send those over to you, 30 plus pages of information. The last thing I'm going to do to close us out tonight, because it's almost freaking 2:15 in the morning, I want to talk about some of the intangibles here, what the stats say, what the notes say, and really do just a matchup breakdown really quick. So without getting too deep into the weeds, I'm going to talk about some of the notes that I compiled here from a matchup perspective. We talked about each guy individually. Now let's talk about how this fight sort of comes together. So we've got a 3.5 year, just about age gap favoring Ciryl Gane in this matchup. He's around 32 years of age. He's taking on Francis, who's around 35 and a half, right? Both athletes here are at roughly height parity, about 6'4" inches on both sides. Ciryl Gane variably listed at 6'4", 6'5" inches. Then we've got a 2-inch reach advantage now favoring Francis Ngannou, right? So I think that in a matchup that could be decided on the feet between two strikers, we've got one guy with power, right? Way more power, and he's got the reach advantage. So he might be able to deliver it from outside of that typical range of a Ciryl Gane opponent. Something to keep in mind, right? I think that, Ciryl Gane, I don't want to speak out of turn here, so I'm going to check really quick, but I don't believe he's ever fought somebody that he has been at a reach deficit against. So let me check that really quick here. We've got Ciryl Gane, and I'm looking at a career retrospective. Has he ever fought somebody with a longer reach? Dontel Mays, he was at a 1-inch reach disadvantage. Every other opponent, he has had a reach advantage in the fight. So something that Ciryl Gane is going to have to prove he can deal with here. Hasn't had the opportunity to do so yet against a high-level opponent, but I'm sure he's excited about the opportunity to do so in this upcoming matchup with Francis Ngannou. So now we look, despite having 13 UFC bouts compared to only 7 for Ciryl Gane, Francis Ngannou has a half-hour fewer fight time. So around 73 minutes of fight time for Francis versus 106 minutes in the octagon for Ciryl Gane. So it's kind of strange to think about that, but with half the fights, Cyril has spent more time in the octagon, which speaks to his lack of power. I would stipulate at heavyweight, by the way. But Francis, 8 UFC knockdowns, 11 UFC finishes. Guys, he's 11-2 in the organization. 2 losses by decision, 11 wins by finish for Francis Ngannou. That includes, I believe, 10 knockouts, 1 submission over Anthony Hamilton, like we just went over. And so this is a guy who's freaking scary, who's got a lot of freaking weapons, and he's got more finishes than he even does knockdowns, right? So if he doesn't knock you down with a blow, he's still creating damage such that Curtis Blaydes couldn't see out of his eye, and the fight had to be stopped. So Francis, if he doesn't knock you off your feet, is still going to bust you up, do a lot of damage, change the way you look, change the complexion of your face, change the structure of your brain. The guy hits like a freaking truck. So then we look, Ciryl Gane, right, on the other side of the equation. He's got 2 UFC knockdowns. He's got 4 UFC finishes, only a 57% finish rate in his victories compared to 100% for Francis Ngannou. So you've heard people talk about, if this fight goes to decision, Ciryl Gane's going to win. Hey, he's got a lot better chance, based on the statistics that we have so far going in, right? Also, you think about the volume. More than likely going to be a little bit more volume on the side of Ciryl Gane. He throws a little bit more. However, something that I don't think people are talking about enough in this matchup, no one suppresses volume quite like Francis Ngannou when it comes to that octagon. And Francis Ngannou right now faces, when it comes to the amount of strikes he faces per minute, let me get that number for you folks. So right now, he's only facing under 5 strikes per minute spent at distance. Guys don't have the confidence to throw very much against Francis Ngannou. Another reason why this is so compelling is because Ciryl Gane seems like he's going to be the guy who comes out and throws and who has that confidence to do so. Stipe had a much different game plan. He wanted to come out and wrestle. He did not want to throw with Ngannou. So Ciryl Gane very well may be the first person who wants to willingly, happily engage Ngannou on the feet, and may have the tools to actually survive that exchange. But to this point, it's been few and far between that had the skills to survive, much less to win moments or to hurt Francis at all. Francis, big, strong, durable guy. That's the other thing I note is hard to hurt this guy, hard to bother him, hard to get him moving backwards. So here's some of the interesting components here. I look at this from a stylistic perspective. I look at it from a fan perspective, but now I'm looking at it from a pure betting perspective and trying to understand how these guys have performed in their roles as betting targets, right? So Francis Ngannou, as of right now, 3-0 in UFC bouts where he is an underdog for 176% ROI and an average odds of plus 173. And so if we quickly, refer back to the notes, I know it was the Curtis Blaydes fight twice that he went into that fight as a betting underdog. And oh goodness, what was the other fight for our boy Francis where he was the betting underdog? Goodness. It was Cain. Yeah, so Cain Velasquez coming back off a 2-year layoff. He was the betting favorite against Francis Ngannou, and that did not turn out well either. So, 3-0 right now as an underdog in the UFC is Francis Ngannou, but that also means that we look at Francis Ngannou. The guy has just been favored basically the whole way out. Ciryl Gane, he's the favorite right now in this matchup, minus 150 odds right now. And Ciryl Gane has been a favorite in every UFC matchup. He is undefeated as a favorite. He has been an average odds of minus 307 so far in the UFC. And he has returned for his bettors a 33.9% ROI. So if you bet on every Ciryl Gane fight, that's the rate of return that you could expect if you were flat betting the same unit. I think that Ciryl Gane, he's been producing for people. I get why they want to back him as a favorite. Frankly, I've backed this guy as a favorite more than once to some acclaim. I backed him against Volkov, one of my favorite heavyweights. I thought that was a fight that he was going to win. I backed him as well against Jairzinho Rozenstruik. I thought that was a matchup that he was pretty well suited for because I didn't think Jairzinho was going to throw very much over the course of that fight, and he didn't, right? So I think that, I understand the rationale for betting on Gane, especially if you bet on Gane every UFC fight. It's like, yeah, no brainer. I get it. You want to bet on him again here. He's been consistently returning you profit. I understand that. That being said, I think that Francis Ngannou, you've had few and far opportunities between to bet on this guy as an underdog, right? So Francis Ngannou, now we get him at this underdog price tag, defending his belt, right? That's interesting to me, especially a guy who's undefeated as a UFC underdog. That's interesting to me. And a guy who's got 100% finish rate, right? So if you look at the Francis Ngannou inside the distance line, best you could do is about plus 155 right now. And yet his money line price is about plus 130. So there's really a small difference here. The books are shading this towards Francis basically can only finish inside the distance. Francis to win this fight by decision is well over 10-1. Francis to win the fight by sub is like 28-1. Basically people think Francis is knockout or bust in this spot. Not quite sure that I agree with that take. But let's go over the overall odds performance. Francis Ngannou, his odds performance, 11-2 overall, 85% win rate. Average odds in the UFC of minus 165 for a 52.8% ROI on Francis Ngannou. So if you have flat bet both these guys in the UFC, you have made more money backing Francis Ngannou. That's in part because he's had more opportunities. It's in part because he's been an underdog more often. But yeah, even despite some losses for Francis, he has been historically the better bet in terms of ROI. Then we look at, I like to consider, what do my eyes tell me about a matchup? What do the stats tell me about a matchup? It's another good question to ask. And for this matchup, I broke it down a couple different ways. Reed Kuhn from Fightnomics. I got the book here. Oh, Can I make the poll? I can. So, guys, if you don't have a copy of this, phenomenal book. I recommend it very highly. Tremendous amount of information about fights in here. Great pictures, graphs, all this stuff. I got it highlighted all the way through. I really enjoyed it. But one of the things that he talks about in there is the Uber tail of the tape. He did release an Uber tail of the tape. I'd encourage you guys, if you've never checked it out, go to Twitter, look up Fightnomics on Twitter, Reed Kuhn. Very smart guy, understands a lot behind the numbers, the data, behind MMA stats, UFC stats. And so in his Uber tail of the tape, I tried to take away some interesting, figures, facts here. The distance knockdown rate, there's a massive, massive edge for Francis Ngannou in this fight. 12.7% according to Reed Kuhn's knockdown rate versus 0.9% for Ciryl Gane. So just a massive edge in the power there for Francis, according to the statistics. In addition, Gane is the much more accurate striker, and that's true at all levels of the body, right? So Gane is more accurate when he attacks the head, the legs, the body than Francis Ngannou. So he gets to the target more often, just doesn't tend to hit with that same amount of power that you see from somebody like Francis, right? We've got Francis has a better strike landed to absorbed ratio. Very small difference between the two. But again, this speaks to my point about Francis muting volume from people. He does not land as many strikes as somebody like Ciryl Gane, but he limits the amount of strikes that come back towards him. He limits the amount of shots that he gets hit with. And so he still has a positive differential in terms of the strikes that he's giving out towards the shots he's receiving, and especially in terms of the impact of those strikes. Numerically, it's very close, but the impact of a Francis Ngannou strike is very clear and evident. That being said, got to talk about the chin here. A lot of people are expecting this fight to end inside the distance. A lot of people very confident, no matter which side they're backing, somebody's going down here. Fight doesn't go the distance, is heavily juiced right now. I'm going to just peek over and see what the fight doesn't go is at. Yeah, so minus 245 right now is the best available price on the fight doesn't go. Minus 281 is the market average. So what I'm seeing there is that, this is freaking a matchup that I look at and I say, the public very confident the fight's going to end inside the distance. Neither guy has ever been knocked down. Neither guy has ever really been that badly hurt, rocked, or staggered in any of their fights, period. Not in the regionals, not in I can't go back and find evidence that Ciryl Gane's ever had like a tough day. Like the guy is literally just, on all the time. Has a lot of really good footage behind him. Can't really find a lot of shit footage behind a guy like Ciryl Gane. I haven't seen the guy get hurt. But I just have a hard time imagining that there's a guy out there, man, woman, child, anywhere in the world that can eat a clean punch from Francis Ngannou and no-sell it, multiple times. So for me, we have one of the most freaky, compelling fights that you could possibly imagine on paper. You've got a guy who's got, all these boundless skills, who looks like the freshest prospect in MMA. And on the other side, you've got a guy who's been hard to read for bettors. When I look at Francis Ngannou, people have lost 994 units on Bet MMA fading Francis Ngannou. So almost 1,000 units down the shitter, fading this guy Francis versus minus 790 in terms of units lost betting on Ciryl Gane, right? So yeah, people have lost money fading this guy Ciryl Gane, but they've had fewer opportunities and they've lost less money. People have lost more of their hard-earned cash betting against this guy Francis Ngannou than they have betting against Ciryl Gane. And it's not that long ago that Ciryl Gane was the same price against Alexander Volkov. Guys, Alexander Volkov is not the kind of guy who can knock your head clean off your shoulders. Francis Ngannou is. And I would favor Francis personally pretty significantly over a guy like Volkov, even though I think Volkov is a better striker than Francis on paper. Yeah, absolutely. He's got better skills. But Francis touches Volkov on the chin once, which would happen. And Volkov is going to have very strong reconsideration of whether he wants to continue this, fight that we're having. I appreciate my man Z's MMA in the chat says, this is next level Liam right here. Man, I went hard on this matchup. This is one I'm really excited about. Went very in depth on my notes. I appreciate that you're recognizing it, my man. If you guys are interested, in the description box below, the odds mug, it is normally my receptacle for all of these shows. Like I said, I'm in a little bit of an improvised studio today. Didn't have it with me. Got to drink the coffee straight from the source, but great mugs. I have 2 of them myself, the odds mugs, the dog mug. It's all on the information below. Check out my man Z's MMA. He does some live streams as well, going over some tape study, and I've learned a ton from the guy. So I think it would be a valuable resource for you. And if you're not following him on Twitter, great follow on there as well. But just to close us out, guys, I also pay for an advanced analytics subscription, right? It's part of what helps me cap for these fights. I know not everybody likes to use statistics, but I like to see, what does my eye say? What do the numbers say? And the numbers on this fight, also are pretty compelling here. Gane, 100% takedown defense, only 4 takedowns faced. I mentioned that before. Francis, spends more time in the top control when he gets to takedowns. I think that's relevant. But by another measure, right? So one stat package, one set of analysis says 12.7% knockdown rate for Francis compared to 0.9% for Gane. Another independent, stats package, right, compiles their own data. This isn't UFC stats, right? Francis Ngannou, 6.3% knockdown rate, one of the highest in UFC history. I believe 4th or 5th highest in UFC history, right up there with Conor McGregor. Compared to 0.5% knockdown rate for Ciryl Gane. Absorbs less strikes per minute by about 0.24 strikes per minute. So again, Francis Ngannou, just slightly less damage being absorbed by Ngannou, and Cyril on the other side not capable of creating as much damage in as short an increment of time. Then neither man spends greater than 10% of fight time in control positions. That's interesting to me here, because if one of them elects to try and do so in this matchup, it could be a huge difference maker, right? If we see Francis get and pursue takedowns here, that could be a game changer. Likewise, if we see Ciryl Gane level changing, improving that takedown game, we've seen he's a willing, persistent wrestler that has the cardio base to back it up when he's attempting those shots. So if he's made improvements technically, tactically, and he can get to those positions, get to the body lock, take down big Francis, I think that's a great way for Ciryl Gane to test the cardio of somebody like a Francis Ngannou. And last up for me is Francis has a 54% significant defense rate compared to 37.2% for Ciryl Gane. And so, again, just want to highlight the fact that you'll hear everybody this week talk about, what I think are pretty, plain narratives for this fight. It's either going to be an Ngannou knockout or it's going to be a Gane decision, or it's going to. That to me sells short the majesty of this fight. It's a fight where there's a lot of unknowns, right? But one of the guys that I listen to in this game as well, and who happens to have that stat package, right? MMA by the numbers. If you look into what he says, whenever you have a lot of unknowns in a matchup, that's the kind of thing that should tend to push the line a little bit closer towards 50-50, right? And here's some of the unknowns that I think about when I think of this matchup. How is Francis Ngannou going to approach fighting his former training partner, who may have some inside information into how he prepares for his fights? Likewise for Ciryl Gane, right? Francis Ngannou has some insight into his training situation, his coaching environment, the camp, where he comes from, what makes him tick, So we've got 2 guys that have a little bit of intimate knowledge about each other. How does that play into the fight? Does that have a role? Does it have an impact whatsoever? Can Ciryl Gane take a punch from a big hitter? Let me remind everybody real quick. We've got Derrick Lewis, big puncher, no doubt about it. Most knockouts in UFC history. Got to give that credit and respect. But I would think anybody could agree that was a pretty flat performance from Derrick Lewis. Not his best work, certainly. Volkov has some knockouts, more of a volume threat. Remember, he jabbed Greg Hardy to death, right? So it's not like Volkov puts away everybody that he gets in the octagon with either. Doesn't really have tremendous power. More of a volume threat, more of a precision striker than a power striker. Then we've got Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Yes, has the death touch power. No, it's not going to work if you don't throw your hands. He attempted very few strikes in that fight, didn't put himself in a position to win. So, I guess you could say that Cyril neutralized a guy with power there. And so I want to give him the credit and the respect for that. But I also want to say, that was not a good game plan from Jairzinho. He acknowledged after the fact that he let himself down and he gave himself no chance to win. So I'd like to see somebody who gives himself a chance to win with the power, hit Ciryl Gane and see how he reacts. And then JDS, right? JDS wasn't really able to put the hands to him. Late stage JDS wasn't really at the peak of his powers, and he was in there with a faster, more cerebral guy who's got a fresher, more up-to-date version of the game. Better hardware, better software, complete fucking disaster for JDS. So it was a non-starter. And then other than that, Tanner Boser is like a virtual light heavyweight. Don'Tale Mayes is, now making some improvements, but he came out here his last fight and he's the wrestle grappler, taking down Josh Parisian. Whereas in that fight, he was looking to do spinning back fists and run away. Again, said respectfully, but the Pessoa fight, Pessoa really had very little to offer somebody like Ciryl Gane in any phase of the fight. So, who is really this big threat that he's faced? I thought that it was arguable in that, Adam, what the heck's the guy's name? Adam Dixka fight. Ciryl Gane, that was in the second round. He actually started to tire there because he thought he had an opportunity to finish. He was unloading and then started to slow down a bit. So, do we see one of these guys have a significant edge in cardio? You'd want to think that it's Ciryl Gane, but he's got to be able to enforce a pace, as far as I'm concerned, to make Francis feel the cardiovascular implications. And so, is Ciryl Gane the first guy to not have his volume stifled by Francis Ngannou? I want to go through UFC stats for just 1 second and read off. Francis Ngannou has absorbed 12 strikes versus Miocic, 5 strikes versus Rosenstrike, 4 strikes versus JDS, 1 strike versus Cain Velasquez, 1 strike versus Curtis Blaydes, 20 strikes versus Derrick Lewis, 70 strikes, the most he's ever absorbed against Stipe Miocic, 70 strikes over 25 minutes, even with the freaking wrestling, even with everything else, even all that top time. That's it. 70 strikes, most ever landed on him. Then 1 strike against Overeem, 3 strikes against Arlovsky, 0 strikes absorbed against Anthony Hamilton. Significant, that is. 3 strikes absorbed against Bojan Milojevic, 24 strikes against Curtis Blaydes the first time, 5 strikes against Luis Henrique. Francis Ngannou don't get hit, ladies and gentlemen. Not very often. Not very often. So I think that, a lot of people are running to the window betting on this fight like they already seen the outcome. I don't have as much confidence here. I think a lot of people are ready to crown Ciryl Gane the champion here. He looks like the goods to me. I'm not going to be ashamed if Ciryl Gane is my heavyweight champion, when I wake up on Sunday morning. But I don't think that the outside the cage drama plays an effing bit of what's going to go on inside the cage. I think inside the cage, you got Francis Ngannou to deal with. That's a real guy. That's a guy who's serious. That's a guy who's offering you threats. That's a guy who I think I've demonstrated over the course of this tape study. He's not just a one-dimensional power striker. I know that that's what everybody wants to label him as. That's an easier way to think about this fight. But he's actually a guy with power in both hands. And he's actually a guy who can snap off high kicks at the heavyweight division. And he's a guy who, when he commits to a strike, most people turn and tuck tail and run, much less like stand in the pocket and exchange with it. Ciryl Gane, I've seen him get in exchanges, stay in the pocket, even with big, scary guys. Stayed right up in Derrick Lewis's face, throws spinning back elbows against him, right up along the cage line. So Ciryl Gane's not afraid to get in the fire. What does that look like? What does that look like this time? Does Ciryl Gane just walk around him and kick him in the leg for 25 minutes while Francis stands there and lets his title belt slip away? I mean, it's possible. I don't see it happening. I think that if Francis Ngannou loses this title, he probably loses it going out in a blaze of glory. I think that Francis Ngannou is not going to roll over for anybody. I don't think he's going to be a walkover fight for anybody. Again, Stipe Miocic basically had him in the worst position you could be in.
21 minutes left in a cage fight. I don't think I'm better than this guy. I don't have the skills, and I'm dog tired. And he stayed in the fight, and he never broke, and he never quit on himself. And he got hit hard, by the way. He got hit hard, clean, with no hands up, no defense, because he couldn't afford to do it with his cardio. And he took the shots, and he kept moving forward, and he kept swinging and trying and attempting anything with no gas left in the tank. I don't think that's a guy who's going to hand over the title belt, right? And just like Stipe Miocic, the rumors of his demise were often exaggerated, right? How many times did we hear this one's over for Stipe? He's not really that good. This is where the freaking, floor is about to fall out from under him. And then people talked about him as the greatest that there's ever been. And then people talk about him as a bum again, right? Because Francis beat him, so now he's back to being a bum. I think that Stipe is actually class, right? I think he's actually really good. I think he's a good game planner. I think he's a smart guy. He got outwitted by Francis Ngannou in the rematch. Make no mistake. Stipe had good ideas. I got to get this guy working. I got to get him standing back up on the single leg. But he couldn't do it. Francis knew it was coming the second time. He made the better adjustments. He went against the champion, right? I looked at that fight. I broke it down very simply. I was like, if you're getting knocked out by Daniel Cormier, who's like 39 years of age, you are not going to last for 25 minutes with Francis Ngannou. So we don't have the same evidence that Ciryl Gane is going to get taken out here. But what I can say with some certainty is that Francis Ngannou hits people and they don't react like they react when other people hit them. He hits people and they react poorly, almost invariably. And that's been the case throughout his career. So I think that Francis Ngannou is a live underdog here. It's crazy to say. The guy's fighting to defend his own title that he fought and earned the hard way on the strength of a pretty damn legit win streak, where he's faced, I'd say, a pretty damn high level of adversity as well. And I think that Francis Ngannou, I don't know that he's the future of this division in the same way that somebody like Ciryl Gane is. But what Francis Ngannou to me represents is that same, title roadblock that Stipe represented for him. And he's being fed the same way, guys. He's given the same promotional push. Please, you're going to be our next guy. Take the mantle from this guy we don't like. But that guy that the company doesn't like, he's not trying to give up this title to the young buck, especially not a guy who's, taking his role at his old team and his. No, I've never met a man who would settle on that too kindly, right? I think that this is a fight where both guys coming out, blood and guts performance. I expect the best from both guys. I expect the two best heavyweights in the world on Saturday night. And if it's not skill for skill, it's will for will. Francis Ngannou gave everything to get to this position. I don't think he's going to give it up in an instant. But if he does, it will be to Ciryl Gane, one of the best talents we've ever seen from a prospect perspective. Undefeated as a Thai boxer, undefeated as a mixed martial artist, wins by submission, wins by knockout, wins by decision, can go the 25-minute distance. What could you say to indict Ciryl Gane? I would say this. He has less experience. He is not as proven at the championship level. And this is the biggest, high-pressure situation of his career. So while it is possible that he comes through here, I am not going to be laying the chalk on a guy whose biggest win to date is the drubbing of Derrick Lewis, potentially the 5 rounds against Alexander Volkov. Gane is a thorough guy. He's an effective fighter. If this fight makes it the 25-minute distance, I do think it becomes more likely than not that Ciryl Gane is the winner. But if this fight ends inside the distance, I have to favor Francis Ngannou. He has just a shocking knockdown rate. If he lands at a normal clip of 30 plus strikes in the fight, it's very possible he lands at least one knockdown because he's got a tremendous amount of power in all of his limbs. So I hope that you guys have gotten the same amount of enjoyment out of this fight that I have. Breaking this down has been tremendous fun. My man Al Mack in the comment section says, gives this video a thumbs up. I appreciate him for it. It's a great reminder as we start winding down on this video. Guys, I want to open up the floor. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, if you want to see more of this in the future, if you want me to make slight adjustments to how we run this format, but I think that this was a really good time. I hope that you guys have gotten some enjoyment and benefit out of this, and I'm good for it on that Twitter deal. So if you guys want access to the notes, just go ahead and get at me. Let me know that you're subscribed, like this video, and I got you on the notes. So that's basically everything I got for you guys. I want to let you know on the way out. My man Gian says, Liam with the ultimate breakdown. This fight about to be cake. Hey, I hope it's going to be a great fight. I hope it's going to be well worth everybody's time, effort, and attention. It's a $75 pay-per-view now. These bastards at ESPN keep ramping up that price on us little by little. So, they better make it worth our dollar and give us some great entertainment. I think that between this championship heavyweight fight and the trilogy match, at 125 pounds between Moreno, Figueiredo. That's a hell of a fight, guys. It's absolutely championship level stuff that is worth that pay-per-view price of admission. Hopefully everything else delivers as well. I think that we've got a tremendous fight card on our hands, and I'm excited to break down the whole thing for you guys tomorrow. So like I mentioned, you want to read more that I've got to say, I'm going to do full previews for Roto Grinders like I do every week for that main event. Also, you can find my information on here, LiamPicksFights. You can find it on Twitter at LiamPicksFights. You can find me on Instagram at LiamPicksFights, basically anywhere you can think of. And I appreciate the support. I appreciate the support of my sponsor, PrizePicks, as well. Want to let you guys know, PrizePicks got some projections going on for this weekend. If you want to try your hand, UFC 270, put a little cheddar on the line. A little cheddar makes it better. That's what I always say. Promo code Liam. They'll deposit match you 100% up to $100, and could be a fun way to play along if you'd like. So appreciate each and every one of you guys for stopping by. God bless you all. Good luck if you decide to take action on these fights. Always gamble legally and responsibly. Do so within your means. If you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, reach out to me. I'm LiamPicksFights. This has been another great episode. For the first time, we did a full in-depth tape study, and just want to shout out my man because we did get a question here. Would your mind change if Cyril was the dog? And that's a great question, right? I think that this is a fight where, yeah, I want to line up with the plus money, right? I have an opportunity in this fight to line up with my man Francis Ngannou at plus money. He's a great talent. He's the proven champion. He's got tremendous power. But yeah, dude, if you tell me on the other side, hey, I got a guy who can win minutes here, who can, bounce in and out of range, got great movement, great footwork, never been knocked down, and has, cardio to do the whole damn thing for 25 minutes. And I'll give it to you, 45% indication or lower. I mean, it's like, yeah, I gotta play that too. But we're playing odds, not fights, right? I think this is a fight that should be pushed closer and closer to that 50-50 mark. There's a ton of unknowns here. How does it match up? How does he deal with the power? How does the grappling play out here that we really have a hard time getting a baseline? I think that there's a lot of unknowns. For that reason, give me the experience. Give me the underdog. Give me the champion. Give me the power, all those things. But yeah, man, if you could get I totally understand and respect the people that took those pick'em prices early on. Want to shout out my man Betting with Bush. If you guys aren't familiar, check out Betting with Bush on Twitter. But my man Bush, months back, locked in 8 units on Ciryl Gane at minus 115. He's going to end with significant closing line value. Who can hate on a play like that? But I just want to say, I think that I've seen a lot of confidence among the sharp people that I follow that Ciryl Gane's going to beat him here. And most of the arguments have been, hey, he's a better fighter. And I agree. Yeah, like Ciryl Gane, skill for skill, is a better fighter. I just don't know how much that matters to the outcome on Saturday night. And that's what we're always trying to figure out is who's going to win this fight on Saturday night and where does the betting value lie? I think the value lies with the underdog. I think it lies with the champion who's being a little bit undersold, a little bit disrespected in this spot. Ciryl Gane, an impressive prospect. I think he'll be back, right? I think he'll challenge again for the title. If Ngannou doesn't lose it to somebody else, I would not be surprised if Ciryl Gane is the man who takes this title from Francis Ngannou in the future. But I think it's a big task in your 11th professional MMA bout to take the title from Francis Ngannou, from the sitting champion, who's got that tremendous power, who's got a little bit of insight into how you operate. I think it's going to be a great challenge that brings out the best from both individuals, both competitors, I'm going to line up with the underdog in that fight. But yeah, Taylor, or excuse me, Gerhard, I totally understand where you're coming from. And it's all about that price. I'm not trying to be Nostradamus here. I think anybody can win this fight, but ultimately we're in the prediction business. I got to make one. I'm taking Francis Ngannou to retain his title by knockout in the second round. But if I had to, throw out a sneaker here, I would not be stunned. It would not be jaw-dropping to me if Francis Ngannou submitted Ciryl Gane after rocking him badly. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I've been wrong about these before. I said Calvin Kattar could submit Giga Chikadze, and it didn't happen. But he did take the back. He did get to those dominant positions. He did look for the opportunities. And I think we could see something similar here, where I would not be surprised if there's, attempts back and forth at that 10-finger guillotine if guys start getting, overzealous on their takedown attempts. If Cyril is able to pop out on the back, I would not be surprised to see Ngannou resort to that Kimura trap again. So fascinating, compelling matchup. As you can see, I could talk about it all night, but my man Bon Kwee stops by, says, just got here, gonna rewatch this, but did Liam say he liked Cody's statement? Bon Kwee, my man, have not talked about the full card yet. Looking forward to doing so tomorrow. I'm going to be coming back at you guys with my full card breakdown. Was supposed to go over this card with a guest, and so ended up improvising, doing a deep dive main event tape study here. So that's what we just finished up on Kwee. Just finished up going over in depth what we think about Francis Ngannou, Ciryl Gane, all their information. So Bon Kwee, if you want access to that information, my man, just go ahead and get at me on Twitter. I'd be happy to send you over the notes, over 30 pages just on the main event, my brother. So like I said, guys, I'm going to log off now, call it a night. I appreciate each and every one of you guys. God bless you all. Enjoy those fights. And until tomorrow, I'm coming back at you with a full card breakdown then. Get some rest, sleep up, everybody. And only a couple more sleeps, as John Anik would say. So this has been another great episode of Liam Picks Fights, and I thank you all for taking part. God bless, and we'll see you on the other side.